Yeah, I guess we'll talk about the general, from our experiences in clan battles, what we think is the best lineups, what we think are good tactics, just tips on like how to shot call, how to move your team around, properly, kind of like the general overview. We got a lot of stuff to go for, so I'm just kind of like reading the list right here. Communication, why you would pick certain ships, and how to set up team strategies. So I guess we can just start off by talking about the recommended ship lineup, and it's going to vary by team. I know like Adopt mainly runs two Zhaos, two Hindenburgs, Yamato or Montana, usually a Yamato, and then typically a Des Moines and then a Gearing. And I don't know if you guys want to talk about what like '07 or Conqueror runs.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I think we should probably introduce ourselves also. I'm Evrien. I'm from the clan CONQR, and also today with me here we have WilliamTheDank and BFK. Are you guys around?
Present.
Yeah.
I think BFK
BFK?
said
BFK
he was,
might have just dropped in. I don't
Oh,
think he's home yet.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we have the two '07 clan as well. They are very strong and competitive. So I believe together we can provide some very useful insight for anyone who's interested in learning to call and leading a team in clan battles. For Conquer, I guess, well, I'll start off. I'm the main caller this season, and we run two DDs, different from what Grusky said about Adopt one DD. Generally, many teams in the top sphere, I guess, they choose between one DD or two DD, and that usually is what makes the most difference. And by open water and radar ships, which is to say like Zao, Hindenburg versus Des Moines, Moskva, the numbers don't really tend to differ much. Like it's mainly the +1, -1 difference, and you do see some extreme examples eventually. But generally speaking, the meta kinds of depends on how many DDs you run per team. So many players discuss the composition in terms of how many DDs we have on this composition. So William, you want to give some insight about '07?
Sure. '07 on our main team, we've been running a two destroyer setup with one radar. We're not super tied to any particular battleship. I'm a fan of Yamato. Ruslin's a fan of Republic, so we switch things up from time to time.
Yeah. Sorry. I should add myself too. Conquer runs a Gearing plus Yue Ying, and we run triple Zelcom plus a Minotaur as radar. It's a very unique and niche build. We kind of enjoy what the benefits it does bring. I'll go deeper into why we do that later if we have time. So yeah, back to you, Gross.
So our setup, I think we've been a bit less enthusiastic about the Zhao buffs. We're still only running one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because the fact of the matter is Hindenburg can just take so much more punishment.
Yeah, that is true. And we'll talk about like ship differences a lot too.
We've been running Gearing, and we've actually been testing out a Grozovoi in place of what used to be a Yu Yang. And we've been having some pretty good times with it. I think that ship's a bit of a sleeper.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely has more of a place now that it has heal. The torp range is like we kind of talked about that possibility too, but the shorter torp
The
range.
torps are never going to be a superstar, but
yeah, exactly. Sometimes you'll get lucky with the 16-kilometer torps, but as I said, lucky, torps in clan battles are sometimes just kind of based on luck. They're more there for area denial and everything than they are actually landing torps.
It's more of the dread of torps incoming that stops the push than the actual torps themselves that do it. When the torps are not spotted, they are more effective than when they do.
And one of the things, just talking about team comp is how that sets up your strategy. And like I noticed pretty much everybody here mentioned only running one radar ship. Is that right?
Well, we have two because we have Yue Yang as well.
Oh yeah, I guess
running one radar ship is probably a bit sparse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I meant like one radar cruiser.
It'll kind of depend on what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Really, like William said here, it really depends on your strategy and also the map you play, because you can deploy ships in certain way that one flag may not necessarily need a radar, and this is something each caller has to come into a map and with this awareness, where do I want to place a radar ship, where is he needed, and all that.
It also depends on the rest of your composition. Like if you're running two destroyers, then it's a lot easier to get away with one radar.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. and you know, just kind of like the general thing. We have our alpha team, which is our more like experienced players, and then we use our Bravo team for like the people learning to play clan battles. And of course, like the first day, we kind of let them go around and experience some clan battles a little bit. Some of them have never played before, and instantly they started running a composition with 3 Des Moines, a Moskva, a Yamato, and a Yu Yang. So they were like loaded with radar, but it obviously having too much of that, just because at least there's 4 radar cruisers that I can think of off the top of my head, and they're all pretty static ships. They kind of just mostly island campers, or they're not really open water, move around and move about the map. Like we have Moskva is pretty static. If that gets caught broadside, it's gone. Des Moines, kind of the same thing, at least has better concealment to deal with it. Worcester, same thing, and Minotaur as well. So they were kind of playing a composition where they had no flexibility to move around. It was pretty much just dig in and you're stuck there. It was great for defense, but nothing more.
Yeah, that's kind of also
it's great initially for defense, but once the enemy team has seen what you're doing and has had some time to react to it, then they can just find a weak spot and use it.
Yeah.
You basically just have to move around the map, see where the radar ships are positioned, and you can easily just get rid of that. So yeah, that's kind of the thing. I think William, you said 07 runs Republic.
Sometimes Republic, sometimes Yamato. It depends on who we've got on the battleship today.
Gotcha.
And
Roslyn is a fan of the Republic.
Yeah, both are
punish those Hindenburgs and those Zhaos. I've been leaning towards Yamato because it's just kind of easy mode.
Yeah. William, you want to go a little deeper in why you prefer Yamato and Republic over the other 3 tier 10s battleships?
Well, it's because they overmatch 30.
Right. And what's magic about 30 for the stream?
The reason why overmatching 30 is important, in case you don't know, the two most problematic cruisers in the game at tier 10 are Zhao and Hindenburg, and they're covered in 30 millimeter. Like, you cannot do anything to them if you can't overmatch 30.
Yeah, I'm showing on the stream right now. I have the armor layout.
If they're piloted by a good player, we're not talking about like Squall halfway through the season.
Or like basically anyone who knows how to angle in Zhao Hindenburg will be laughing at Montana and Kurfürst salvos.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Like if you even manage to hit a shell, it'll probably just bounce.
Boing. And I guess someone did mention this before. So William, what about CONQR 457 millimeter?
But then you're running a CONQR.
I guess like the major drawbacks to like CONQR in general is its sigma is pretty low, meaning its accuracy.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, when you compare a CONQR to a Republic, I think there are a couple of things that stand out. First of all, CONQR 457s especially have worse reload than Republic, same number of guns. What
Sigma's
else?
the same.
No, bad Sigma. Worse
Bad
Sigma.
Sigma.
Is it? It says
Really?
wasn't it 2?
Republic has 2.0 Sigma. I was actually
457
surprised to learn about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
The dispersion is I think worse than Yamato's, but the Sigma is pretty close.
The Sigma makes up for it.
Yeah.
Republic shells are also especially fast, and it's pretty maneuverable. You can haul it around the map if you want.
And plus that you also get a speed boost, so it's easier to reposition. So depending on your clan's playstyle, if you're more like reposition, like you tend to jump between 2 flanks a lot, or you want a battleship to kind of like station anchored down one flank completely. That's kind of thing you want to think about between choosing Yamato and Republic in this case. Also, if you don't have these 2 ships, you want to run a Montana, for example, that's fine too. Montana is always being a pretty stable pick.
Montana is completely fine.
Yeah, we're not saying like you have to have this ship to have a chance to play, but basically these are what we consider to be the good ships for the meta so far.
Yeah, Klein, do you have anything to add? Klein's usually our battleship player. He flops between Monty and Yamato.
I generally prefer the Yamato since I always like the overmatching Hindenburg's part instead of like bouncing all over the place.
Yeah.
It kind of
I also like how it's it's a really good ship for pushing objectives as well. It has a lot of momentum.
Yeah, it's got a ton of armor for even Hindenburgs to burn through.
And it scares a lot of cruisers away too.
Right.
Just the
I know. I wouldn't be in the path of a Yamato pushing when I'm in my Des Moines or Minotaur or any of the cruisers, to be honest.
Yeah, and I guess
maybe a Moskva. Maybe a Moskva.
Before we move off of like battleships, I want to touch on like some people brought up like the GK, and at least on NA it's not used and it's laughed at. But I was I
think it's safe for every server right now.
Well, no, EU still uses it. Last time I checked, I was talking to one of the guys from like Wargaming Pay to Win and Omni. I think Omni is the one who mostly runs it, and they were kind of talking about it. And I think it was Yura. They're on like the Help Me Discord. They did like a training clan battles thing, and they talked about this too. That the reason why they use GK is for pushing basically, and they only use it in their no DD comps.
That is fair.
They use like the giant health pool and the momentum of that to just move forward, take a lot of health, damage for the cruisers. So I mean, I guess we're one thing I just want to stress with this is if we ever say like, hey, this ship is not good, there are like certain cases where they can be used with a good team strategy and a good player.
Yeah,
but
I would also like to
teams can't do that.
Yeah, I would also like to state how curious it was for like when I talked to them that we ran the Yamato here in NA, and it was mostly like Yamato and Montana. They kind of like sneered at the Yamato.
Yeah,
they thought it was like the worst ship for clan battles was the Yamato.
I think it's like a difference in the meta between the servers.
Yeah,
also,
yeah.
Like,
I was just like mentioning because how fascinating it is. The difference between the metas in both places.
Yeah, but I think like we can all agree on when we share our opinion on why this is the case for us. Like if we're playing the same game and the servers, even though we differentiate by meta, like I'm sure that you guys would agree with us in why we pick certain ships here too.
Like I think you guys are insane for running a Minotaur, but you guys obviously do really well. So I mean,
well, it's not just us. A lot of top clans run Minotaur. I'm pretty sure William here and 07 also tried Minotaur eventually before, and they have their own opinion about the ship.
Yeah, exactly.
I gotta say, it's annoying every time.
Don't you dare say that we imply that we've run a Minotaur, sir.
Oh, my apologies. Then. I already assumed you guys may have considered the possibility.
Don't you fucking dare.
Do you want me to go deep in why we chose Minotaur over like the other more like? Are we still on Battleship right now, or are we moving to cruisers? That's my question.
Yeah, we can move to cruisers.
I think Battleship's already done, honestly.
Yeah. Well, nothing too much on Battleship. Like there's just the big guns try to take out the cruisers, especially when there's so many cruisers, only one Battleship each game. The reason why we run Minotaur over, let's say, Des Moines or Moscow is because, first of all, the concealment is awesome. Minotaur also has what we call the radar trap, which is why when you have the radar range that's larger than your concealment range, ships like Chapayev and Worcester also have this. And they are very effective in just when you're spotted, you press them immediately, and the DD is guaranteed to be in your radar range. And they won't even know on the game sort of like forewarning. So yeah, it's very effective. Also, what also is that Minotaur is actually pretty effective in a flank that when you have a area of open water around the cap you're defending. Because despite what Minotaur people believe to be weak armor, she does have very weak armor, yes, but she only suffers in the case where she takes citadels and the concentrated fire from enemies. And if she can easily disengage by just sailing to open water, free from a radar, because most Des Moines and Moskvas will be camping behind islands, they use that presence to just deter DDs from pushing. Like that is a weak reason we run Minotaur for that purpose, where we don't play near the island and instead we rely on the player skill who is in the Minotaur to be confident enough to play himself around the open water area to deter pushes and the DDs coming into taking out the cap. So yeah, that's why.
Cool.
Well, I guess before we move away from Minotaur, then how do you guys feel about like the Worcester then? Like with the
yeah, well, like as we said, we only run like 2 or 3 games with Worcester. We thought about is that yeah, it's like the biggest thing we see is that it has the ability to pump out like tons of HE shells and damage DDs from every angle, not worrying about Minotaur shells bouncing off DDs. But the thing about Worcester is that it's also sluggish. Like I'm sure like anyone who's played UNC Outline will agree with me in saying that Worcester isn't the most nimble ship in the world, especially compared to Minotaur, who has the Royal Navy acceleration to just get out of speed boost and get off situation right away, or that the Royal Navy heal to heal himself back up. So it really depends on if the player has enough confidence in playing himself around. And also Worcester kind of is if you run Worcester, you kind of have to play a little bit like in the open water area. Otherwise, why would you run Worcester versus Des Moines? Because Des Moines is a much better island camper with the 6 front-firing guns versus your only 4. So yeah, basically that.
I'd say it depends on what kind of island you're camping, because
that's true. That's
in my
true.
opinion,
yeah.
Worcester is a bit of a sleeper right now. If you can get it positioned right, like one of the reasons why this is going to be a bit of a tangent, but it'll come back. One of the reasons why people started running Zao is because it counters Hindenburgs, right?
Yes.
Like, what you do is like on hotspot, you go up to the west, and then you find the Hindenburg, and when he tries to turn out, you give him a 20k.
Yeah, or Henri, for instance. Henri was pretty popular in first season as well.
We've actually done a little bit of testing with Worcester, and I think a reason to play it would be in order to counter someone who's sitting in a static position. Because what you can do is you can get a Worcester in position to start firing at a guy who's just sitting there, and you'll have 3 or 4 salvos in the air before he actually gets to start properly moving and avoiding your shells. If he even can start avoiding your shells, because they just go over the islands and drop right onto him. And if he's in a position where he can't really move, or else he'll start getting farmed by someone else, well, then he's just kind of stuck there being farmed down by some of the highest HE DPM in the game. That has undeniable power.
I still think Worcester is viable. So ARP has been running Worcester since the beginning of this season. We've been experimenting with how we run it. Most of the time we're running it as, if you go to the EU meta, for example, and you look at how they run their Minotaurs, we're running it in a very similar way. So it's running as basically a substitute DD. We don't use it as an island camping. We use it as a complete open water destroyer, which may sound completely dumb for a ship with very little armor. But you've got to realize that firstly, with 9.5 kilometers concealment, the only thing that can outspot you is destroyers. And since you've got 9.9 kilometer radar, if you run into a destroyer, you're going to win that gunfight. And being able to have that 400 meter buffer between your radar range and your spotting distance means that it's very, very hard for an enemy destroyer to get out of there. So, for example, if you run headfirst into a Yu Yang, it's going to probably take at least 3/4 of its health in damage before it's able to get out of your radar range, if not completely being killed outright. And just the fact that there is a Worcester in the game provides that significant threat, right? For example, if the enemy team doesn't have a Worcester, they've only got a Des Moines, you can be fairly confident that they'll be camping a rock somewhere, and most importantly, if they're in the open water, your destroyer will spot the Des Moines at 10.6 kilometers and will have a good 700 meters to turn around before having to worry about radar. With a Worcester, that's not there. If they get spotted by a Worcester, they're already going to be radared. And they've got to play a lot more cautiously than they would against a Des Moines.
Yeah, the other thing I noticed too, we only did a couple of games with this last night with this, so I guess take that with a grain of salt. But one of the things I did find with the Worcester is you could find islands that you could safely shoot over, at least like your back turrets, and not be spotted, and like you were saying, shoot at static enemies, and they couldn't do anything about it. Like they just had to.
The arcs are higher than Des Moines, so it's even easier to find a good island to hide behind.
Yeah,
especially
I honestly don't think the Worcester's strengths lie within destroyer hunting, because the arcs are just so bad. It's pretty hard to actually hit a destroyer before he escapes.
I disagree. Like, I've reliably killed very good destroyer players at 9 kilometers and above. I've in maybe
but at the very least,
games, I solo kill a destroyer. Of course. I'm not saying
situation with something like a Des Moines.
Yes and no. Like
obviously,
the Des Moines positioning is very predictable. If you look at most maps and you go to a competitive team, they're going to be able to point to the 2 or 3 spots where Des Moines is probably going to be. And because of that, a good competitive destroyer player will know how to avoid a radar or know when to expect radar. So, for example, if you go to hotspot, you know that there's going to be a Des Moines on the south or north side of the sea cap, or you might know that there's going to be one on the other side of the flank watching the 1-2 line. They're all very predictable spots, whereas the Worcester has got the freedom to kind of roam around and be that kind of constant threat on, say, the off flank. And it also allows it to work really, really well with, say, a Gearing and a Zao. Or actually just like with his Zao itself and without needing a destroyer for cover, because it can there's nothing in the current Clan Wars meta which will outspot it and not be able to be spotted back, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah,
but
the main
I think
threat
it's important
is
not
just
to
getting spotted and open.
overestimate the power of Worcester just being as a destroyer counter. I think that if you put it into that little section of your mind, it's easy to forget that this ship pumps out damage like nothing else against
that's why we
battleships,
run it.
everything that it can put its
Yeah, that's why we
shells
run
on.
it over, say, Minotaur. So Minotaur technically can do the same thing with radar, but with the AP, it doesn't. It's not as reliable against destroyers since you can angle against it. And the AP damage has no fighters, so it's got no synergy with the rest of your team. The only advantage is really the torpedoes, but we'd rather more consistent high explosive damage than torpedo damage.
Another underrated thing about it, HE spammer like the Worcester is a little bit of the psychological effect it puts on an enemy battleship player. If they're just sitting there and say it's a Yamato or Montana, just sort of mostly static or trying to get an angle, and they start getting peppered with Worcester shells and start getting fires lit every few seconds, it makes them kind of nervous and just agitated and want to get rid of you, and then the rest of the team might change their focus, or that battleship then just kind of moves and goes.
There's good reason behind that.
Yeah, exactly.
It puts out damages and it puts out fires.
Yeah, many battleship players, when they're not trained enough, they are pyrophobic to an extent, and Worcester definitely is.
Panic, right? So and
panic
trying to make
panic button activate
is a good thing. Yeah. And that's another thing we found with Worcester as well, is it's really, really good for countering Hindenburgs and Des Moines. Just as long as you take IFHE and you aim for superstructure or the front of the bow, you're reliably getting 3 to 4 to 5k volleys every 4 seconds, and it's very good for forcing them either out of a position or forcing them to retreat, or just outright siege moding someone down if they're stuck.
Forcing damage control party too. That's
it's the fire chance is not, fire per minute is not quite as good as the Des Moines, if I calculated it correctly. But at the same time, unlike the Des Moines, you get to fire more often, and because of the fact that you're able to run it in a more open water kind of thing, and you can actually kind of kite in it, which sounds dumb, but you can do it.
It does have a better citadel than Des Moines.
Yeah.
Well, you can do it as long as the battleship isn't around.
Right.
Yes.
There's only one
and no. Unlike the Minotaur, for example, if you get shot and from the back in a Worcester, you'll get overmatched. Don't get me wrong; you'll take 15k AP damage, but you won't get citadeled, and that can be a big difference. It can mean that you can chance taking out opening fire from open water and not having to worry about getting outright blapped. Whereas in a Minotaur, you would never really do that.
I guess one thing I wanted to touch on before we move along recommended ship lineup is the difference between Yu Yang and gearing, and what that'll kind of say about your team strategies and mindset. And I'd say Yu Yang has been the most popular, at least the most commonly one I've seen on NA at least.
Yeah, I mean, they're both. I think a lot of people underestimate gearing simply because it doesn't have radar. We've been running gearing with and without the legendary module, which gives it a little bit of extra concealment. We're still debating whether it's a good choice or not. It does lose a lot just for that bit of extra concealment. Yu Yang is often used as the main pushing flank because it can radar enemy DDs and it doesn't have to worry about smoking up its allies. A gearing, for example, works really, really well if you pair it with a couple of Zhaos and you stick them on the off flank and just get them to hold. So what you can do is you can get the gearing to smoke your Zhaos at a range of 10 to 15 kilometers away. You send the gearing off to your spot, and it's incredibly difficult for any team to reliably push into that. If they're a good team, what they'll do...
does that.
Yeah, if they're a good team, what they'll do instead is they'll work around your Zhaos and they'll try and create different angles of fire, and that can be a really good counter. But most inexperienced teams will just either try and push into the Zhaos, or they just won't push at all, and that's perfect.
Yeah, Lobster, I don't know if you wanted to start talking. Lobster's our main TD player, and he prefers gearing over Yu Yang. I don't know if you're there. Okay.
Yeah, sure. So I found that if you make an effort to use the smoke, it's definitely quite effective. And also just having that threat of torpedoes that can hit other destroyers will force the destroyers to play more cautiously when you're in sort of a spotting cat and mouse game. The other destroyer has to be thinking about your torpedoes actually hitting them. Whereas, at least for me, it's really relaxing when I'm up against 2 Yu Yangs because I don't have to worry about torps at all. I can just sit broadside and spot them if I want to. Also, our team uses a lot of blind torping lanes on our strategies. For example, hotspot, you can launch blind torps towards C as you sail there. And using gearing torps, the extra range generally makes a difference. And there have been a not insignificant number of games where I've got an early torpedo on the enemy destroyer, and that's pretty much almost game over quite
That
often.
can be GG.
Yeah. That's like,
So-
what, 15k immediately from the health pool, and definitely a huge advantage for your next gun trade.
Yeah, one of our strategies has been to rush A on Sleeping Giant to basically catch any enemy DDs going for the same strategy. So we'll set up all our ships around it. We'll have a radar ship there, and then the gear will
One
basically go towards
strategy
it.
you can use on Sleeping Giant is that you position your battleship so that your spotting range extends over the middle entrance to A. And by doing that, as soon as you get spotted, you know there's a destroyer there. Then you can coordinate with your radar ship to instantly open up. And you can usually catch them out as they try and get through that middle gap. And as soon as they turn broadside, they'll die.
Yeah, you can do that now to a certain extent, but unfortunately they nerfed the corner of the northeastern island. And now you can't do it as easily. Top 10 enemy death.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we usually send a Yu Yang to that side.
That's the only map where I'd say that I definitely prefer Yu Yang just because of my ability to do my own radar. But even there, the gearing, I'll sometimes drop blind torps as I'm going in there. And one time we actually hit a torpedo on the destroyer, which was the only reason we actually knew that the destroyer was pushing because I'd already been radared and forced away.
Yeah, I mean, you should always be throwing blind torps out. Like, torps in Clan Wars are fire and forget weapons. You kind of just chuck them where you think there's going to be ships, or you chuck them where you think there might end up being ships, and just pray.
And 95% of the time they don't hit anything, but the 1
Yeah.
to 5%
Everyone's got Hydra, so you can't really rely on them anyways.
And that's also
like deterrence, more for like scaring the enemies away than actually, well, hitting them is good, but not
If you're ever going to hit, then it's not because you're a good player. It's because you got lucky.
That's also a very relevant point as to why I prefer the gearing as well, because Yu Yang's torps are better in that they're harder to spot, but lots of people will be cycling Hydra, and if you're coordinating well,
Yeah,
the Yu Yang spawning
you've
advantage
always
is
got to
less useful.
assume that they've got Hydro up. A good team will never have Hydro down on either flank. Of course, if against maybe a more experienced opposition, you might be able to catch them off, but you shouldn't count on it.
Yu Yang tends to fall into like the stagnant meta of when you see one, it's more like 99.9% of the time it's running radar. Like very rarely will you see one that's running smoke for it, because especially after smoke nerf, taking away the constant perma smoke meme the Pan-Asian DDs have. So, and also that a roaming radar with 7.5 kilometer range and a radar trap of himself is very powerful, trapping destroyers and just getting friendly ships to fire on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's kind of at least the general like recommended ship lineup. We can kind of move on to tactics. Evrien, you put together a
but just before that, I think we should touch on like we discussed earlier, like Grozovoi. I like to hear from William about like especially after the recent buff, and plus the legendary modules effects. So just want to hear more from whether ARP or 07 has run this and what they think of it.
Well, there's a certain philosophy that I've heard about in the military from time to time, and it's like, does doctrine dictate the weapons, or does the weapons dictate doctrine? It's chicken and the egg, right? And I think Grozovoi could be a case in which the weapons dictate doctrine. Grozovoi is overpowered. There's no two ways about it. It's overpowered now in random battles. So the question is it overpowered enough to make its mark on clan battles? And I think it's likely. Because you can get into an engagement with an enemy destroyer, smoke up and run away, because a lot of people run gearings, right? And 130s get through the gearing plates. So you can get in a gunfight with a gearing, run away, but then you can heal up and he can't. And that gives you a big advantage for the next engagement. That's a bit of a niche case where Grozovoi is very strong against something else. But there are also, of course, various other cases where it could be doing some pretty great things. For instance, the AP is the best destroyer AP in the game. especially against cruisers. It can do some serious work if left unchecked.
Yeah, I
that's my
agree.
spiel.
Grozovoi is excellent in random battles. I don't know if ID Caster is overpowered yet. I'm just still waiting to see what happens. The problem is that, yeah, I definitely agree. It's kind of like Republic. It's strong in Clan Wars, provided you build your strategy around it. For example, we often see a lot of Clan Wars teams using Republic as like a handicapped Yamato, and it's just straight up worse. If you want to use a Republic, you've got to use it as a mobile ship. And that kind of goes the same for Grozovoi in the sense that if you try and use Grozovoi as just a makeshift gearing, you're going to be let down. You've got to use it as like almost a dedicated destroyer hunter, and you've got to kind of build your team around supporting that Grozovoi. So if you're willing to do that, and you'll have to probably mix around with your strategies a bit to try and accommodate that. But if you can, I'm sure Grozovoi is going to be a good pick.
One thing, are we enough of a timeline that we can talk about whichever is like, what about 1 destroyer strategies and 2 destroyer strategies? Resky?
Oh yeah, we can kind of touch base on that. Thanks for reminding me. So yeah, I guess the general thing I've always thought about 1 destroyers or 2 destroyers is 2 destroyers. You basically have that for, you know, the off times a cap might be open, but really mostly just for spotting. I don't know. We haven't really run 2 DD setup a whole lot, or at least effectively. We haven't been too great at it. I don't know if any of you guys have been running 2 DDs effectively. I think
we've been running 2 DDs.
Yeah, since like the last half of the second season, I think the meta was definitely 2 DDs, and it's still, at least while the meta's developing, it's still definitely heavy 2 DDs. The main reason is simply that you've got 2 flanks every single game. Most of the maps in the Clan Wars meta are designed so that you've got 2 different sides to fight on. And if you don't have a DD on one side, it can make things really, really tough. For example,
2 free caps and then the cap that you guys have to actually fight on.
Yes. And for example, right, like we run into teams where they have Zhaos instead of DDs, and then you just send the Yu Gang up to that flank with a couple of ships to support it. And they're completely helpless because there's nothing they can really do against a ship that can outspot them. Because you've got to remember that when you've got better vision than the enemy team, you can dictate when you want to fight, you can dictate how you want to fight, you can dictate who you want to engage at what time, and that's like extremely powerful when it comes to focusing down ships one at a time. And also, it's got a great morale effect because trust me, like the enemy team does not like it when you can pick and choose who you should open up on and when, and you have the luxury of going dark whenever you want.
Yeah, this is what we call the informational asymmetry, when one side has the informational advantage over the other. In this case, like Teahee brought up, when one side doesn't have a DD and Zhao just gets outspotted and nowhere to run, he is under the asymmetry's negative effect, where he just doesn't have any sort of counterplay. And the only thing he can do in this case is to run away, giving ground, while of course giving away health for pretty much no reason. And yeah, that's a big ouch and no go for most of the top clans, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think the worthy of note is the fact that if you are running only 1 destroyer, then chances are you're choosing to make up for that by running a second radar.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way that you can regain the informational asymmetry thing. That's the only way for you to regain the spotting advantage.
Yeah,
so for to neutralize the spotting disadvantage.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So for example, right, like we've been running kind of like 1.5 DD. So like we run Worcester and Des Moines, but we use the Des Moines as the static radar, and we use Worcester as a fat Yu-Yang. And so that works as like our way of trying to counter that spotting disadvantage, but it also brings in a little bit of extra DPM because obviously Worcester's a lot stronger when it comes to gunpowder than a Yu-Yang, and it's a lot more tanky. But yeah, I don't think we'd ever try and go to a situation where we only use 1 destroyer ever again, unless the meta changes a whole bunch, but I don't seriously doubt it.
Oh, I think worth noting, ZR. ZR has been running 0 destroyers, and they're the first people in Hurricane this season.
Yeah, I think it's also because
2
ZR
Moscows, a Des Moines, I think double Hindi, a Zhao, and a Yamato. That's their lineup.
I think they are doing what
pretty significant success with it.
Yeah, I think they're doing what
I've been talking to like Halcyon about it, and the reason that they're doing that is that they're extremely aggressive. I don't know if any of you guys have gone up against Yikes, which is like a newer competitive team this season. They've only got like 11
Oh
members.
yeah, we have. Oh yeah,
but they're
we
all
have.
really, really good.
Great
And
memories.
the strategy, so the strategy that Yikes uses is really interesting in the sense that they just bomb rush one flank, and it sounds very crude, but they do it very, very well. They're very coordinated. They've got the personal skills to do it well. They charge in a couple of Yangs. They support them very closely, and they completely overwhelm one flank. And ZR uses a toned back version of that. And so, in order to counter the spotting disadvantage, they quite simply push closer. And again, it's not a strategy that every clan can use because they are very skilled individual players, and they've also
got radars
really good
sitting in 2 of the
communication.
caps, and we don't need to give a fuck about the rest of the map.
Yeah.
Like in clan battles, like about 40% is strategy and 60% is personal skills. Or you can they vary a little bit depending on composition. But generally speaking, I think personal skill, out trading the other side in engagements definitely matters a lot. So you have good cruiser players who can force more damage onto the opponent and they can force onto them. Definitely, that's going to bring a lot of pressure on one flank as opposed to the other side, right? So So don't take anything we've said here the definite doctrine of how we do it. In that the composition we discussed today are the ruling meta of the tomorrow. In that we just want to give you guys a perspective, the guys on the stream right now, to decide on what you feel like is your best composition to build.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything else you want to add over ships, or do we want to move into tactics now?
I'll just mention one quick thing.
Evrien manages to talk so much without running out of breath.
What's
Talk so fast, dude.
up,
We've
Lobster?
run into some non-ZR clans that have been running no DD. And I think it's because they were talking about the EU server is definitely moving towards 1 DD at minimum. Or at max.
The trick with EU, though, is that just because they're not running any dedicated destroyers doesn't mean they're not running something in a destroyer role. So they are running a lot of Minotaurs and a lot of Worcesters. And they're running them as destroyers. So it's not like the destroyer has completely disappeared, unlike the ZR way. But the destroyers there has just kind of evolved into a really big cruiser.
Salty was on that shit season 1, all right? It held the one spot for the entire season except the last day.
Wait, you guys ran 7 Moskwas, 6 Moskwas in the very beginning, though. I gotta remind you that.
that was like 2 weeks.
Yeah, that was cancer.
We got over
That's
it.
fun.
What were you trying to say, Lobster?
But that's what I was basically going to mention, is that if a non-ZR team is running no destroyer setup, they're probably going to be running at least 2 pseudo-destroyers, which are going to be Worcesters or Minotaurs fulfilling the same role.
That's kind of like the thing you give up with adding more destroyers, is you lose firepower. Like, we ran into a team a while ago running, I think it was 3 or 4 destroyers, and it was like, well, okay, we could just kind of walk in and we're going to win any gunfight as long as we somewhat stick together. And they really couldn't do much.
A lot of spotting plus and spotting when you run no destroyer. But like we said, ZR basically has ways to work around that, and it's really just down to what kind of composition and strategy you have in mind.
Yeah, we had Ivan give us a hand. He actually helped us a lot on the early seasons because he shared and helped us with these strategies from ZR. But a good amount of the strategies that they use just wouldn't really fit with us because we just weren't that good. Their strategy relies on personal judgment and overall superb skill for it to work correctly.
He gave us a lot of advice. I guess that's a perfect segue into tactics. Is he gave us a lot of advice that was really good and really, really improved us. But we had trouble understanding it on their level because obviously they're the number 1 team right now, and they without a doubt have a lot of skill. And I guess one thing to keep in mind when we're talking about these ships and then just our strategies in general is one strategy doesn't work for every team, one loadout doesn't work for every team, and kind of find the strengths and weaknesses of your team. We kind of took what he was saying and he gave us general ideas that we're going to talk about, setting up a crossfire, that we just didn't think about it because we were just kind of there to have fun and play, but we also wanted to win. So we were well, how could we do that? And just general tactics of hey, you want to set up I like to think of it as a Y shape where you have 2 ships together pointed at one ship. That way the one ship coming at you has to go broadside to one of them and they can't really properly angle, just basic things like that in coordination. So if we say hey, one thing is it's not the end all be all rule or anything like that, and it's okay to experiment and try those things out and modify it to how it works with your team, because we started losing more and more when we adopted his strategy until we kind of just tailored it to what we were capable of. and it started really working. So I guess just the general things of over tactics is I'm gonna pull up Evrien's page right now, and give me 1 second. I'm gonna pull it up on stream. If you guys want to grab the link, it's in the mentor chat, and we can kind of add to this too. If you want to start off, Evrien.
Sure. Well, I kind of just assumed the audience will be wanting to learn the basics of clan battle calling, and I didn't make this any sort of super unicum level thing. It's just going to be the very fundamentals basics. Oof, someone's changing the slides a little bit. Let's start with the slide 1. Basically, I want to start off, discussing the idea of an off flank versus main flank, which I think is a very important concept to learn about if you want to do well in clan battles. Like, you have to divide your force in a way that fits to the objectives on the play. Otherwise, it kind of just falls apart because one side doesn't get enough firepower and the other side doesn't bring enough firepower to the objective of that flank. So to start off, I guess, is everyone on this page right now? Teahee and William are on the page. I can see William is here. Teahee, are you here?
No, not yet. Let me just get on.
Yeah, it's in the chat because and I put 2DD conversation for both sides on, as you can see on the screen. So because like we said, we believe that 2DD is a very strong way to go. So if you have enough good players in destroyers and you want to try it out, by all means go ahead. That's one thing I can recommend right now. So first of all, let's take a look at this map. This is Sleeping Giant, and although it's a little bit outdated because this is Walls Tactic, a site that many players run for their theory crafting discussions, but I don't believe this is up to date yet because, for example, Warrior's Path, the A cap was changed fairly recently, and that 2 islands in A cap is still yet to be added. So, right, so just it's going to be a little different, but it's only the matter. I think the shape of the island over here and here-ish. I don't even know exactly what's changed, to be honest. So I think it's fine. So in this case, when you have this map is also very popular this season. Also, I think this season is named after this map, so that's why we see it so much in rotation so far. We have 1 BB, 4 cruisers plus 2 destroyers on both sides. I'll leave it up to you guys on deciding what these 4 are for cruisers and destroyers are, because I think it matters more for the individual clan how they want to run their compositions. But generally speaking, I believe William, are you here?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to just do this with me? You take the red side, I'll take the green side, and we position as how we would if we were to call this composition, and we explain why we would position ourselves in the beginning for this off flank versus main flank thing. How about that?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess so. Do that. One thing that Evrien and Matsukaze that was in CONQR and now is in Yikes. You guys really helped us. You guys did a bunch of training battles with us last season. And that was instrumental in us, also becoming more player and adding to what Ivan did. And one of the things you guys really drilled into our brains is the main flank or the off flank. And we would kind of have a separate thing where we'd split our team 4 and 3, which necessarily isn't bad, but you lose the focus. You kind of have to go in and say hey, this cap is our main cap. And this is what we're going to do as a team, and this is how everybody should kind of proceed, and this is what we want to achieve. And we weren't doing that. We were just kind of splitting the team 50-50, and you can't give all of your attention to 2 different things.
Right. And well, I think William already got his early game layout figured out here. But without telling what's going on here, you can already see William and myself already have different ideas about how to position the ships. I think it also comes down to a matter of what kind of players are in each clan, because 07 and CONQR have different skill levels. I would say 07 is a better clan competitively, definitely right now for versus CONQR. So they may have different idea. But for us, here's why I position myself, and they'll then hand out the podium to William to explain his idea. So 1DD over here, helping by a radar Des Moines or Worcester or whatever, a radar ship, plus two roaming cruisers, so Zao or Hindenburg, your choice. But generally speaking, I want this to be our main flank. This is more force devoted in this area, and they want to really take this cap because let's say if the enemy have like William here, 2 ships versus a destroyer, I have more firepower here theoretically, and I can really make a pressure on this flank. And meanwhile, my eastern flank, which is the right side here, I only have a battleship here guarding it, plus a destroyer and a cruiser. So technically, only a battleship and a cruiser with enough firepower to really dish out something. Whereas William here will be stronger than myself. he would have two cruisers plus a destroyers going up. And I want to defend this flank from William, just hold them for as long as possible while I take this flank. Either kill this cruiser station here, which is likely radar, I think, depending on the position where he is, and also the destroyer here. Yeah, Des Moines. Oh, we have the same idea then. It's Des Moines. And these two cruisers, you'll just focus down this Des Moines, and we'll try to take this gap and hold them off here. So William, what was your plan behind why you set it up this way?
Well, this is kind of a generalist game plan we've got here. So we've got, over in the east, we've got classic destroyer in front of a pair of cruisers. The idea is to try and catch the enemy destroyer. Those cruisers are probably going to be Hindenburgs or Zaus, because they're out in open. Meanwhile, on the other side, we've got a destroyer that just dove man mode directly into the cap, because if you'll notice, on Evrien's side, there's nothing, there aren't any cruisers over here. There's nothing that would just keep this guy from running away if he felt threatened. So he can just get in, take the cap, and get out if he needs to. If it turns out that there's like 3 cruisers over here and he needs to get out. Meanwhile, these guys can cover him and make sure that the enemy team doesn't just rush right in behind him. Also, for the battleships, we seem to agree on this point. Battleships generally need to be in the center of the map, as close to the center as possible, while still being in a decent position, because they are the map control. They are the biggest denier of positions that you can have in the game. I remember at the beginning of Season 2, right after Sleeping Giants was set up, I got so many giant hits as a battleship on a cruiser who was just like sitting here or sitting here, because they hadn't learned yet that the battleship is always going to be out here, and he's always going to be looking right at you.
Yeah, 4 shots, possible devastation strikes even.
Because that place that you like to be in order to like get a good shot at the enemy ships that are way out here, yeah, that's perfect. I really appreciate you being in that spot. Thank you very much.
Right, and yeah, so basically battleship positions are fairly stagnant for, I think, like, 9 out of 10 players in battleships in Clan Battle will agree with us in inputting the battleships over here. You can see the ping on the map. What we do differ is, of course, the idea of main flank and off flank. Willem here kind of relies on both sides having enough players of good skill level to just hold while keeping that objective pushed. Whereas I believe for more clans in the general sphere per se, skill levels is not yet developed to a certain extent. We'll just rely on the numbers advantage in making the main flank versus off flank differentiation. Off flank can hold and just try to deter the push as long as possible until the main flank wins. I am betting on my guys over here to win against Williams, in that either we kill these guys or drive this destroyer off, in that we can then send off cruisers back to the base to help. That, of course, depends on how the game flows goes as well. And really, from this point on, after we deploy the ships as callers, all we can do really is to say, oh, focus on this ship, come back after you're done with this, and help with the with spotting and such. Basically, like that is going to be how the game flows more likely. And there's no real way of saying who will win this battle, because it really depends on how the trades on each flank goes. But if I were to say, I think Willem would agree with me. Willem will agree with me in that their western flank will be overwhelmed by the numbers and possibly taken, whereas they have to make a play on the east and possibly make that the battleship and the cruiser pay for their ignorance of being on that flank.
Yeah. And looking at this particular map setup, I'd say as the game continues, and as the positioning of my team, at least, or the positioning of the enemy team becomes apparent to my team, these 2 cruisers are going to be like, oh hey, there's only a cruiser and a destroyer over here. We can just pull the battleship, have him push around, and then just overwhelm these guys and take B. Meanwhile, our guys who have already taken A because they man mode dove into it can just let it go. We've already gotten a nice little point lead from it, ideally.
Right.
And we don't have to do anything more than slow down these ships that have already dedicated to the pretty far west.
Also, I'll just point out, as a destroyer player, one thing I see a lot of destroyers do in clan battles is they really don't use their guns very much at all.
Mm-hmm.
But the 07 destroyer in A could actually fall back to a position here, and there are lots of positions where you can interrupt destroyers sitting here from
Alternatively,
gaps here.
you could also
This
threaten-
island is very low, and so is this one. After change, I think it was intentional to get more shots into the cap from the outside.
Keep in mind that too, this is the map before they changed it, so some of the islands are slightly different. But I believe those.
Well, I'm talking about like after the change. Like
yeah.
this is.
It's not an enormous difference.
This is
No,
lower
it's
than before the change. Yeah, so that's for sure. Right. We'll talk about repositioning in the next slide, but generally, like this is the main flank off flank differentiation. Depending on what you can play, if your team believe that your skill level is good enough to run William setup in the red, that is totally fine. And execute his strategy of pushing up the battleship in a flank where there's less ships around. Or you can go by the main flank off flank differentiation in a more, I guess, tilted manner. You know, one side has the number advantage to make something work. But the drawback, of course, here, as William stated, if I get held back here for too long, or if this side doesn't really make a progress, in fact, for example, this cruiser gets himself shown broadside and citadel by this Des Moines or Moskva or whatever for too many times for no reason, then yeah, that is not a good trade, and this flank is either on hold or stagnant or lost even. So that really depends on what kind of team you're dealing with right here.
Well, I don't know about lost. Personal player skill means a lot, but
yeah, that's right.
A 3-1, a 3-2 advantage is still pretty significant.
It is.
Player skill definitely makes a difference, but I mean, even a good team strategy can sometimes be a little bit different to push a win in the favor. But obviously, if they're a really skilled team, they're going to have that strategy. So a good strategy can make your team a lot better.
That's right. And player, like we said, player skill and strategy are complement of each other. They don't necessarily replace each other, but having good players plus good strategy definitely has a synergetic effect, like we can see from well, I don't know if that was a good example right now because they just bomb rush. But yeah, you get the point. All right, so shall we go on to the next slide?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, so next slide we have repositioning. This is going to be for most cases like the mid game, where after we get the caps finish capping and teams finally get into a place where they tend to be. In this case, I have once again 2DD on the map, Hotspot. Once again, a very popular pick for this season. For I'm not sure why, but I've been seeing this a lot, like 40% in my rotations for the last couple of days. Yeah, so definitely right. So and also once again, this is for the stream. This is outdated because this island doesn't exist anymore, and I believe a couple of islands inside the off-cap sea here is also changed. So I'm not quite sure what exactly is changed, but one thing I do know is that this is not here anymore. So let's just go with that for now. Everything else I believe on the west is still more or less the same, so nothing too significant I should note. And yeah, this map, I'll make note here in that I believe this is a very fun map to play, and depending on what you have, you can execute a lot of different things in here, which is very interesting. So for this map, once again, off flank, main flank, very differentiated by myself. I kind of just laid out what William would do in this case already. Maybe not sure about Battleship. I wanted Battleship to be more aggressive here. But generally speaking, like assuming this is where we got the 2 early caps already capped and the ships are in position, what to do now? This is where the ships, everyone has seen what the other side has got and or has a good idea of what the composition looks like. And this is where basically, people start to push ships, change ships where they position around and make the next stage, the step 2 of their game plan, execute. I want to bring Teahee into here because I know our pack has a lot of interesting players and skill and strategies. So Teahee, what would you do in this case? Like you can choose whichever side you want, and into just bring some perspective in how you would alter the situation in your favor.
I mean, like, pushing the 1-2 line's always been like a very risky thing because it does mean you're having to push straight into an enemy cruiser. Like for example,
you're talking the red cruiser here, right?
Yeah, or either way. I mean, obviously in this situation, the red side looks like they're going to be the pushing side. But like to bring it into perspective, like against like another fairly good, respectable team, ARP actually sent 1 Zhao on that flank, and now 1 Zhao is able to hold back about 3 or 4 enemy ships pushing that flank. It's really hard to push around that corner, especially when you've got a battleship in Overwatch. So in this map, in this situation, it's interesting seeing is that the green battleship is actually far enough back so that the red cruisers would be able to push up. But the immediate counter to trying to stop that would just be to have the green cruiser kite back as far north as possible and have the green battleship come back to about here. And by doing this, you have this weird arc of fire, which means it's really hard for them to push towards the cap.
Yeah, this is what we call the crossfire between the 2 ships. That the Y shape is being built here.
Yeah, and ideally you'd try and keep this destroyer around here, and that destroyer would be able to keep all 3 of them, or at least the 2 cruisers, permanently spotted, and make it really, really hard for them to either turn out or turn towards the cap.
Yeah.
And while you can hold those 3 ships there, you can also start to move towards the C cap, which is the off cap. And after the island changes, it's a little bit hard to go in there and immediately hug the island. What we usually do is we tell our destroyer to reverse straight into the cap and bait out radar. So if they go in butt first, it's really easy for them to get out. And usually most teams will have, say, 1 Des Moines on that side, and you can bait out the radar and then come back and contest again. And even if you don't actually win the capture point, you can contest it often enough so that the enemy won't really get a points advantage from it. And that'll give you time to, for example, you might want to push a cruiser around the side and try and get shots on the destroyer from there. But be warned, it does take a while to get around there, and it can mean taking some of your firepower out of the fight.
Yeah, especially when it's the
Be
Hindenburg.
problematic, yeah. So usually if you did this, you might send a faster cruiser like a Zhao to do that. And then you've also got to be careful because the red team might, in response, send a cruiser out wide. And that's a very good way to cause problems for that cruiser there, especially if they've got their battleship over here, because then they can get shots down from there. And again, that's another crossfire that they've got to push into. Like from our experience, Hotspot, for the most part, has just ended up being like a waiting game. You've got to try and delay the enemy points until they have to make a push somewhere. And once they make a push, you can kind of counterattack. But trying to attack first has always been somewhat problematic.
That's true, but yeah, like Teahee here said, this map depends a lot, like how you can I guess decipher, interpret the enemy movement and make plans ahead of time. Because this movement right here, you have to really see this guy's coming in here, want to make the push to send the cruiser back here, enough position back, so he's well protected by distance. Also, he has a crossfire angle with a battleship. And this movement here, like Teahee mentioned, the 9-10 line is monumental if you want to dislodge this destroyer right here, because this is the only way he can get shot from, and he has to bail if he sees, oh shit, a cruiser is coming down here, and obviously the island here doesn't protect him anymore. So that's going to be a problem for destroyers, and that same goes for this side, because whoever has this entrance controlled will be able to dislodge the off-cap destroyers, either hiding here or here. I believe the same island placement even after the change. So yeah. Also, yeah, once again noted, Hindenburg is, why we say Hindenburg is especially noteworthy is because Hindenburg is the slowest tier 10 cruiser at the moment. I believe without speed flag, it only has about 30 knots, plus minus 1. Yeah, so it's very slow compared to where Zhao has 35, Des Moines 32, Minotaur 33. Henri can, of course, put on speed boost and whoosh. I don't even know how fast it goes, but I don't have it myself. So. But basically, like all other cruisers can reposition better. So Hindenburg really has to think 2 steps ahead of the time to really make his position worthwhile. Because like getting into here probably takes like on average 1 or 2 more minutes than a Zhao would. And yeah, and also like one thing you may have noted from Teahee's commentary here is that he has a counterplay for everything the other team has done so far. Red team goes here, sure, I'll do this thing over here. Green team that comes around here, okay, let's reposition the cruiser over here to create crossfires with a battleship. Like there is no surefire way to win any flank here. Everything is, you know, the battlefield is fluid, and it's up to the caller here to understand how to use reposition to achieve a goal. And you want to make the repositions to fit to your objective attaining, because the reason you want to push a cruiser here is to take this flank, right? And you want to take this flank, that's why you do it. You don't just push it, oh, I'll just, you know, I guess have you guys go over here for no really reason, just try to see what you can do, because nothing happens in the middle, and there's no reason for sending a ship over here. And right, so basically everything, the biggest takeaway for, I guess, for this slide is that everything in repositioning has to be done for a purpose. And I think it's something that everyone in here will agree.
Absolutely. And I guess one of the things too I want to touch on is like here your team that's defending like your home cap, like, you know, essentially the home cap is the cap you're given. So right here, say if you're the green team, one thing I notice a lot of people do, like we'll run 2 cruisers, so I'll just move 2 cruisers over here for the sake of this argument, is when we were like training some of our new people, they would do this. They would position their ship like this inwards, and that way this is their idea of defending, and which is okay. And then they would do something even like this, and if you kind of look at it, they're not set up for a crossfire, and they can be blocked by their enemy battleship. But I mean, even if you just take like the other side of the map out of like what the point I'm trying to make, like right here, say there's 2 cruisers coming around to greet them, and say this destroyers isn't even here. Right now, what are they gonna do? Like, they can't disengage. One of these cruisers could just go pop up behind one of these islands. Their only real option is to either A, turn out, which would mean then they're gonna give a big broadside, or they just slowly move back, and if these guys are smart, they're just gonna go match their speed and whittle them down. And these 2 are gonna probably focus fire. So one of the easy, simplest things you could do is when you're in a defense is we call it like ass tanking, or like stern tanking, where you position your ship a little bit so you can disengage. Like, one of the things we stress with some of the new people is always have an exit. Like, your life is more valuable than getting a kill. That way, right now, these guys can then kite away going this way, or they could just reposition easier to get crossfire on these other 2 ships. And no matter where they go, they're kind of set up to do that.
Yeah,
we had sorry,
go ahead.
Yeah, what a player in CONQR who would be in Hindenburg constantly bow into the other ship, basically doing what Gross said not to do in this case. We might just give him the boot and say, what, you're not playing in Clan Wars with us if you don't know how to angle your ship around the other way. Because essentially what happens here with the bow in, could you help me rotate this once again to bow in? Let me just show it with the icon. Yeah, I don't know how to rotate the icon here. I'm still running the UI here. So if you see it here, the biggest issue with Bell-In, although you may be having more firepower in ships like Moscow or Des Moines, is that you do not have a way to get around effectively. You have to show broadside as you turn, or you can only slowly back off, very slowly, like 14 knots, 12 knots, while you're back up. And that's, of course, not enough to escape whatever these cruisers can do when they are going forward. And that puts you in a very awkward situation where you can only trade your HP for basically nothing. Well, the enemy side has the momentum and advantage to just push into you and kill you before you can do much. So the idea always is to, when you're on the fend, ass in and turn your ship around before making an engagement.
Yeah, I guess that's also kind of like similar to one of the points I wanted to touch on too, just normally is like, always have an exit and don't bunch up. I noticed that's just like the easiest thing I ever see like people doing. No matter what map you're on, 2 ships right next to each other, no matter where they are, it's not good. As we were talking about crossfires, they can't set up a crossfire. Sure, it's nice to be, fighting next to your buddy or something like that, but you're really not going to effectively do anything. And one of these, say one of these red cruisers sees that, and sure, maybe this red cruiser right here is going to die. But if this guy is quick enough, he can just move around here, and then boom, he has broadsides on both of these cruisers. I guess it obviously depends on how the match is going, but don't bunch up is a simple thing.
Right. That is fair. Does William have anything to add to this?
William? Bow in Hindenburg is a dead Hindenburg.
That's true. Very true.
Very true.
That's the first thing, actually, I think I said to one of the Adopt guys when we did the scrim last season.
That was me.
Yeah.
I think it was, yeah.
All right.
I think it also happened to me too.
It's a good point. Like, I mean, you don't really realize that you want to be aggressive and take your point, but all you're doing is just dying, and you're just giving the enemy team points and then free reign of the map.
Yeah, so I guess the rule of thumb here is that unless if you're defending, always always point the other way so you can run away while you kite, because Hindenburg and Zhao are kiting cruisers. They're not for pushing.
Battleship Hindenburg is a meme.
Hey.
You are not a battleship. You cannot bow tank.
Very misleading nickname, I would say. Okay, are we good for this flank? Sorry, this slide, and should we go on to the next one, which is advantage holding?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, so moving on to the next one. This is going to be on the map Sea of Fortune. This is a map that was in the game for the season 1 of Clan Battles, but back then it was very different in that we have an overlaying cap here. There's an order cap and a smaller cap inside, like in the ranked battle, basically, if you've played ranked, and the second cap over here, I think. It's been a while. I already forgot. I think the second cap over here. But in this case, we have 4 caps in the season, and this is the only cap in the only map in this rotation of the map pool roster that we have 4 caps. Meaning you cannot just rely on taking 2 caps and wait to sit out, just defend these 2 and wait out the points. What if the opponent has these 2 instead, or like the battlefield can change and they have 3 caps in this 2 or 1, and that suddenly is a huge disadvantage going over to you, because that is essentially the same as having 2 caps to no for the enemies. In this case, I guess I want to go over this map for the next 2 slides, because this is a very interesting map. I think has a lot of different ways to play it. So I want to hear from all of the other clan representatives here to get the idea of how they would understand this map. So for this one, the first scenario I've set up is an advantage for the green side. We have, in this case, 2 caps taken by the green, and the red has yet to take the middle cap, the B cap, and only taken their home cap here. And what's more important is that the right side of the green flank has made a good trade and killed the enemy destroyer over here, which is why the little skull mark is here. I think it's very cute. I found it in the UI. So basically, this guy is dead here, and so these 2 cruisers are left alone to defend. And the main flank obviously is over here with the battleship, 2 cruisers and a destroyer here. So the question here I would like to first throw to William, since he hasn't spoken much for the last slide, is how would you, if you were the green side, what would you do to defend your advantage? Because obviously you can either choose to take this cap, or you can choose to go do something else, or just hold these 2 cap and wait for the enemy to make a move. But a lot of teams, from what I've observed, is that they kill a ship in the very beginning, but they don't understand that they have the advantage, and they end up getting killed a lot more quickly than the other side, and end up losing the game in the end because they just don't know how to hold the advantage. So my question to you goes out to, how do you play the green side?
How do I play the green side? Well,
yes.
Well, let's look at the map. We have an advantage somewhere, right? The destroyer is dead. We have an advantage. Where is that advantage? That advantage is over here.
On the east. It's okay.
Advantage is over here.
The UI is weird.
So what should we do with that advantage? We should probably use it to pressure this cap, to take unfair trades against the enemy team, and further develop our lead. This side of the map is pretty much even with the enemy team. It's nice that we have the cap, but we can't really rely on that staying so. And who knows, if we tried to do something over here, then maybe we'd end up giving up our advantage. We can just let that be.
Right. To summarize what you said, then, you want to hold the west, basically just go into defensive position and make the east push.
Yes.
Right. Teahee, what about you?
Okay, so as the green team, like the first thing you want to do is make sure you don't lose your advantage. So that would be the left side here. You want to make sure that this cruiser falls back. This destroyer would probably stay on this island, but if he was getting threatened, you'd again just tell him to evacuate the cap. You would have had a points advantage from that, and you'd have had a points advantage from getting a kill. Usually this cruiser here would be a radar cruiser, so probably a Des Moines or maybe a Moskva. And again, you'd just get them to sit tight. You wouldn't want them to poke out very far. You want them to maybe engage this cruiser over here, and that's about it. The battleship, you'd probably actually want them to move slightly over. And the reason being is that you want to have an arc of fire on these 2 red cruisers over here. And now that you've got the vision advantage, you'd push your destroyer really, really far up. And provided that these 2 aren't, say, radar cruisers, but most teams would probably put a Hindenburg or a Zau on this flank. And so you'd probably be fairly safe. And so you could get this destroyer to not only push up, but throw torps and just try to be a general pain in the ass to these 2 cruisers. And that allows your cruisers to push up. And the good thing here is that you can actually use these islands here to shelter your own cruisers and keep them dark while their cruisers have no cover whatsoever. So it's entirely possible to keep your cruisers on almost full health while completely destroying these 2. And once you've killed these 2, you've got pretty much an automatic win. There's very little that the enemy can do.
Yeah, these 2 will be forced to kite back, giving up map control in this flank while they're doing so. And your destroyer can just take this cap whenever he wants, and that'd be 1, 2, 3 to 0, assuming the enemy doesn't get this cap.
Yeah, and even if even if they actually get that middle cap, it doesn't really matter too much because you have such a massive points advantage, and most importantly, you've got so much map control. Just being able to dictate arcs of fire on the map is an amazingly powerful advantage. Especially against like the majority of Clan Wars meta ships, such as Hindenburgs and Zaus. They really, really struggle when they've got multiple arcs of fire coming in.
Yeah, and one more thing I just like to note here is very, very stupid but very effective. Is that if this ship right here is a Des Moines, like what he is at putting the destroyer over here on this island is actually a very good idea. Because why? If you can just on the screen draw using the ruler function in the tools. Draw a radar radius of 9.9 kilometers from the Des Moines, you'll find that there's a little section on that cap. Actually, I should have positioned the cap a little bit to the left. I think it's like over here because the cap really extends into that island. Yeah, so if you have 9.9 kilometers on that radar from that Des Moines in a position, he cannot reach that destroyer if he hides behind the island, if he's on the very edge of the cap. So it's a very safe place for the destroyer to be, to remain undetected from that Des Moines radar, assuming this is Des Moines, of course. If it's a Moskva, on the other hand, it's going to be very different, of course. But then again, Moskva will be less threatening because shorter radar and also gun arcs not as good.
Yeah, I might just add here that if the destroyer on the off or the flank where the green team has the advantage is a gearing, this is actually not a bad opportunity to use an aggressive smoke for additional cover before pushing.
That's true. Yeah. You can lay down a smoke, maybe like over here, and the cruiser can use it while forcing down these two cruisers to further withdraw. And yeah. And also you have this quadrant, and this quadrant of your map to oops, sorry, and this quadrant to your map to control.
One thing too, with this map in particular, these two destroyers, when they're both parked up at this island, they proxy spot each other. So radar is not as like big of a deal right here. I believe that's ACAP. It's
ACAP.
It's not I don't know, as big of a deal as it is for most other caps in the game, for other maps. So I guess keep that in mind. Like, I know if I were here, I guess not talking about your specific scenario, but one of the things generally is how do you get that destroyer out? And, you know, like we kind of touched on with Hotspot, you go on the 9-10 line. Here you kind of have to...
In this case, 1-2.
Yeah, 1-2 line, you would make a push there, maybe reposition some ships, or, you know, your whole loadout of ships to kind of go up with that. Like, I believe what you can kind of do is, just like we've been stressing, create a crossfire. Actually, this be a Zauer Hindenburg likely, and they would actually kind of be here where destroyer would then kind of have to rock back and forth between these two ships. They can kind of both get fire on that ship, and you also have to look at that is what is the enemy team going to do against our ship? They're probably going to do the same thing. So even if you don't get this like perfect crossfire, it's just a win sometimes if you deny, say like, this ship right here, if you just deny him from getting that angle on your destroyer, and then this ship over here too, you just say no, they can't do that. Sometimes that's, you know, the biggest win too, if they're denying you as well. But at some point, you guys can't just stare at each other and do nothing. Somebody has to make a move.
It's also not too hard if saying, not in this situation in particular because this destroyer's dead, but one of these two cruisers could move up over here and have a really easy shot at that cap if this flank is kind of stalling. If you need to kind of break the stalemated A and you aren't making much progress on the far flank, you can pull one or maybe both, but probably not, of these cruisers over this way, and then depending on what their range is, if they got a spotter plane or whatever, they could hit this cap pretty much. Everybody's moving arrows. Without much difficulty.
All right. So anything else to add for this slide before we move on to the final one?
No, I think that's pretty good.
Okay. So the next one is, of course, we talk about advantage. What about disadvantage? Something happened wrong to our team, and our initial deployment idea fell apart pretty badly. So, how would you basically come back from a position where you are disadvantageous from the enemy side? So in here, once again, Seal of Fortune. This map, except this time the green team is on the losing side. The west side here has lost a cruiser, either by battleship blopping or just straight up bad trading. That this cruiser is dead, and the destroyer lost his cap to the enemy side destroyer, and we now have basically this flank folding to this and to red side. Meanwhile, the right side, the east side, still has a stalemate going on for these two cruisers plus the destroyer against these basically same thing on the other side. And I guess I'll throw the mic first to Teahee this time. In that, how would you, if you were the green side, how would you react to this and make a comeback?
Okay, well, first, I think this one's important for map control. So,
yes.
For example, right, if I just draw, the easiest way to think about map control is that you want to be controlling approximately half of the map at all times. So if you draw a line straight through the middle of the map, that's probably how it starts once you spawn, right? You have the bottom half and you have the top half. But as we can see here, you've actually lost one cruiser on that side. So your map control now has to look like that. And so the important thing is that you've got to reorganize your ships to try and fit with that direction. So first, you'd probably bring back your destroyer to here. You'd have your cruiser sit back further. You'd bring your probably Yamato or Montana further over, and then you'd have to start pushing, because once you're a ship down, you cannot afford to play defensive. Unless the enemy team is extremely foolish and decide to push into where you're most strong, which is highly unlikely, you have to try and take it back to them and hopefully catch them off guard. So here what we do is we push up the battleship far into this middle section here, and this is risky. You can get crossfire from down here, and so you have to try and use these islands or move up even further to there, and you have to try and push into these cruisers here, and you have to catch them out before they realize that they're being pushed, because if they get back to say here, then they're going to be safe. But before then, they're in a crossfire, and it's very easy to take them out, provided you can push up fast enough. And the important thing is, as soon as you lose this cruiser over here, you have to start repositioning, and you have to start preparing a counterattack. You can't afford to wait, and you can't afford to try and play defensive. Once you've beaten this and you've taken out probably this one, maybe one of the cruisers gets away, but they're low health, and you continue to push up, you again have to go super wide, and you have to again try and control arcs of fire on the map. Even though you might be down ships, it doesn't mean that you can lose map control. You can still have a larger degree of map control with less ships, provided that your positioning is good enough. Yeah. And again, the important part is just taking out that destroyer. Once you have him gone, suddenly the scores are a lot more even. You're back down to one ship each, and you can start pushing again on this flank, and you can start holding again on this flank.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I like the visualization you especially draw here, Teahee. That's a very good way of understanding what map control is. Generally speaking, that this is a pretty good way for all callers to start visualizing how they want the team to look like for the composition. And now, I guess, if nothing else from you, I'll reorganize this to give it back to William and ask him about it. All right, so William, I believe we started with something like this. Sorry about that. Yeah, so something like this. How would you do if you were in control of the green team, William?
Well, I more or less agree with Teahee, honestly. Like, yeah, you've got an even setup over here. Your chances of winning it are 50-50 at best, but you need to try and take that chance, because
that's right.
If you don't, then you just lose. There's nothing that you're doing if not that.
Yeah, especially if if you don't push or make a move when you're on disadvantage, the game is lost. Like, the game doesn't just somehow miraculously bounce back in your favor. There has to be some sort of a cause and effect relationship going on to receive back the advantage. And also, something like, I guess, what the William and Teahee here both noted, of course, is that making the east push, because you still have a strong flank over here. Like, even though this cruiser is died, but this side is still good enough to reorganize your ship's positions over here, Battleship and the Moing, to help these guys to take this flank. Like, if this side is lost, sure, then we'll just take this side. We'll trade this cap for this, and this ship's death for destroyer or these two cruisers. Like, that's basically how you think of making back a disadvantage, which is to make the enemy suffer the same scenario as you do, and that's the best way to think of it, really. Yeah, and also, I guess one question before we leave off on this map is that the B cap here, what I've observed is that this usually gets capped fairly late, or gets held by two destroyers here, or two ships here, and stagnant for a long time before this cap is being contested. Do you feel this cap's importance is worth taking for the early game, William and Teahee?
Is it worth taking in the early game?
Yeah,
no.
Because it's hard retake. That's the question. So
yeah,
I've seen. Trying?
Yeah, we have experimented, for example,
because
with rushing a destroyer straight in, but it's hard. Yeah, it's very unlikely that they're going to let you just contest it. Let you take it uncontested.
There's a radar cruiser up here. There are cruisers on either side who have plenty of angles onto anyone who's sitting in there. You're not going to take it. What you're going to do is you're going to take a bunch of unnecessary damage onto a destroyer.
Yeah,
before you've even fought someone.
There's a set number of conditions before you try and contest that, at least from the outside, providing that you want to push, say, a destroyer behind that rock there, for example. The first condition is that this cruiser over here has to either have retreated far enough or has to be dead.
Actually, in this scenario that we've got on the map, this is a scenario where Red should be thinking about taking B.
Yeah.
Because this cruiser is dead, the enemy team is going to be losing their map control all the way around here. So you can absolutely just have someone slide into the cap. But only after that cruiser over there has been eliminated can you risk something like that.
But at that point, would you agree that the logical counter move for the green team would be to move their cruiser in like this? Because they've lost.
Not
There's
not
a
really,
battleship right
because
here,
it's-
and he
Battleship
can
right
just move over
here.
here.
It's
That
very
would
risky.
be very, very risky. It would depend on whether the battleship is dedicated to a side. Like if he's pushed into here and you try and come in here, then you might be able to take the cap, but you're still going to have a hard time getting out. If the battleship is shifting over here, then there's no way you can get in on this side. And if you get in on this side, then you're going to be pinched by a pair of cruisers. It's just not a good situation for you to try to get yourself in.
Yeah. And also something I like to make note before finally finishing off here is that these two land masses, like they're here for a reason. Like I think this is probably something I want the other mentors to go deeper in. But basically, this creates a awkward kiting position, a kiting obstacle, if you want to say it, for these guys. So if you want to make a push on this side, you have to consider this being in the way of your retreat route. Oops, sorry. And possibly this is being like your biggest, I guess, hindrance before making the commitment. And this side, the same thing for this one. If you want to really push up here, but if you get held back, you'll be like coming back down here, and whoops, there's an island, I'm grounded, and that's me gone. I've seen that happen a number of times already.
Yeah, paying attention to just the map layout and where your spawn has advantages is like a huge thing to go off of. Like they fixed it, but last season in Tears of the Desert, I believe it was like the north side had that other like that island sticking out above A, and you had less room to kind of move around. And then the south side had that little, I believe it's actually still there, the island that sticks out a little bit. And
it's the west side actually.
Yeah, it can I don't know, it can really just change your strategy and how your team should move and proceed.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they'll change this if now that this map is competitive, but my guess is that they probably put it here to give the north side additional cover, or if you want to put it like obstacle. But generally speaking, I think like if you want to like play kite or like play a push on this route, you have to make note of this landmass being in the way, because this side has a more room to maneuver down here as opposed to you.
It also like sets up a like kind of a good kill box, so to speak. Like if you're defending the green, square here, the enemy is going to come through either through here or right here to your cap. They have two directions. You want to set yourself up in a way to get fire on them. And then same thing going down below. They actually have a little bit more room to maneuver because they're either going to go right through here, or they can kind of hug this island and go through, or they can kind of go wide. So you actually have more ground to cover if you're in the south there that you have to defend against.
And yeah, that's all I have for plan for now. Is there anything else that we think is should be noted by the caller, or like someone who's learning to call before we leave off on this?
No,
I mean, yeah, just like touching on calling, like
yes,
like one of the things that we've been experimenting with is having multiple callers, and I think that's something that a lot of top teams try to do. Like even if they don't have two full-time callers, they have one caller and say a flank caller, someone they can look after and babysit a flank while they're not focused on it. So the way that ARP does it, for example, is there's me and Kaine, one on each flank. And in doing that, like we can focus on trying to like micromanage like individual ships rather than trying to micromanage 7 ships, which is a lot harder. And you can focus on what's happening directly in front of you, and in response, your play also gets a bit better because you don't have to continually be looking around. It also means that you can play different types of ships as well. So it means that you can hop into a destroyer and not be afraid of not being able to render the other side of the map and see what your teammates are doing, for example.
Yeah, we have like a whole section on shot calling, and we can kind of, I guess, start it.
Especially on like for example, if you are a caller and you're over here on this flank, like your rendering range as a cruiser, or as a cruiser, probably that only extends up to here ish. So you don't know anything that's going on if the cruiser's over here, like either health is low or what the other ships are looking at over here. So you kind of have to rely on like just minimap or like your team to tell you how it's going on, and it's a lot harder to do it on like trying to make a call on the other flank when you don't know what's going on.
I kind of put a square up to kind of show your draw distance. Like, you have no idea. Say you're one of these ships over here on the east side. You have, you're not seeing your teammates' health, where they're exactly at. You can look at the mini map and see some information, but you can't see the whole battlefield exactly. And so exactly what you're saying right there. You're not going to see anything. So you kind of need like a main shot caller and a secondary like off flank shot caller. I guess somebody just wanted to clear up like what shot calling is. It's basically who exactly as it sounds, like the person who's calling to tell the team what to do. So
they're fleet admiral.
Yeah, they're the person in charge, making up the strategy. It's good to have one voice, kind of being the overcalling leader, and we kind of do the same thing that Teahee was saying, where we have like multiple shot callers, so to speak. There's always like one person we designate at the beginning to be the leader, and it's kind of like whatever they say goes. Except if we all say like, hey, that's not a good idea, or we should really do this, we see an advantage because they're the shot caller's focusing on their job, we'll all call it out and make sure to say, hey, we see this advantage or we see this disadvantage, let's go either jump on that advantage or let's reinforce our disadvantage. And that's kind of really been helping, but that only really works with a team that has played with each other a lot, or is at least they're all pretty competent players. Some newer teams that are newer to clan battles, I wouldn't suggest something like that. I would have the more experienced person shot call, and having that one overarching voice to kind of like have the whole game plan to move the team is better for a less experienced team. But I guess I don't know how every other team does it. Does everybody else kind of here do like a more free roaming shot caller with sort of an overlord, I guess?
Like our way's a little bit unorthodox. We actually have like two overarching shot callers. It's me and Kaga, which works really well and also like kind of badly at times. So we have a great method of communication we like to call arguing, and like it usually results in conflict.
Sounds great.
But like it does work, and I think the reason it works is mainly because me and him were leading opposite teams last season, and so we fought each other like on a daily basis. So we know exactly how like his strategy works, and I know exactly he knows exactly how my strategies work, and so because of that we kind of meld together quite well. But yeah, it's not something I'd advise like a newer team. Like it's something that like once you know your team members well enough, and once you know your other shot callers very well, and you know what they like to do, then you can start trying to work together. But before that, having like a clear chain of command works a lot better.
Yeah, so in Adopt, we have been doing basically a main shot caller, usually Grusky or Klain. And I'm not a good overall shot caller, but I'm actually a pretty decent flank shot caller, usually.
Yeah.
Myself.
And one of the things too, like, just general overall shot calling advice is, one of our Bravo team shot caller just sent me a message with this, that like make a choice and kind of, stick with it. If you're just sitting there thinking, what are we going to do? It's just that indecision of just sitting there doing nothing wastes time and allows the enemy team to move their advantage on you while your team's sitting there wondering what to do and just sitting there basically. So it's usually good to try to have like the most decisive person. Like, I mean, it can even be a wrong call, but at least you guys did something. And you'll kind of learn eventually, like, from failure. Like, failure is your best teacher of what works and what doesn't. And exactly what Teahee was saying earlier, like, that you should control half the map. And if you don't, you're losing. And you're just moving your team around to take advantage of where you're strongest at. And have that be your focus. And I guess, let's see, ships to not call from. I think I've heard it from every team out there. Don't call from a destroyer. So if you're the shot caller, don't be the DD player. You have a lot of like little things to micromanage. You got to make sure you're in a safe place. You're able to get into spotting range. You're right in the sweet spot for some of the cruisers that have radar, where you can spot them and then they can't radar you. Or if they can radar you, you have to have your exit strategy to get out of there really quick. So you just have like a lot of little things to micromanage. And as we were saying, the render distance or the draw distance, I believe in like a gearing, it's the torp range, which is 16.5.
16.5, yes.
So like,
very.
Yeah, I'm gonna draw a line for it. Your field of view is pretty narrow. You can kind of cover half the map depending on where you're at. And I'll try to even move this square. I mean, if you park yourself in the center of the map, that's all you're gonna see, basically.
So this ship over here, you don't even see their HP.
Yeah, exactly. And I know there's mods to make up for that, but still, like generally, it's not the same as just being able to see exactly where people are, how they're angled, and so on.
Yeah, like in terms of mods, probably like we've had people talk about Navigator. The thing that shows the beeping light on the top of ship that whether they're going forward or backward and all that. Like you of course use mods to further complement you. And what we do in CONQR actually is that we have the players run the team aware mod, which is a one that you can actually draw very detailed lines like you would do on the UI here. In the minimap, and they would all show up on all the players who have this mod in your current team. So it's very effective in getting basically the pinpoint in like how would you want the ship to be. Like you can actually just draw an arrow like this, like yeah. So basically like just like an example. And their team would know how you want to really position rather than just painting the very squares on. So that's something of course to consider as well. I'm not saying mods are essential for a good caller, but like you can put on things to make your calls better. That's what I'm getting at. So really, it's about how you play your team style and how you call. That really makes a difference. And I think like that's the basic essence of shot calling, I would say.
Yeah, and somebody asked what's the best ship to shot call from, and I'd easily say, and a lot of other people would agree, is Battleship. You
yes.
have the biggest render distance. So like right here, I'm gonna draw, the circle again. So say your Yamato, which Clayton, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, it's like 26 kilometers, right? Somewhere around there.
Yep.
So this is what you see, and even if you are in the far back of the map, you can see almost all the players. If you're farther up.
Yeah, Yamato and stuff like that. It's more like 34.
Oh yeah, you're
kilometers.
right. Yeah, that's just
that's just your gun range.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So.
Like Battleship can render a further away distance, and they can see everything. So basically,
you can see the whole map.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a reason why in the World War II, so many flagships are battleships.
And the other advantage of that too is the Battleship has the longest reload of guns. So typically, between 25 and 30 seconds, depending on if you have reload mod or not.
Or
so
30 seconds if you're on your Republic.
That's true. So you have the longest reload time, so you can take that time to go and look at the minimap, look at what everybody's doing, and see, hey, these guys over on the west flank are losing. We need to really go help them or take advantage of another spot because we can't help them in time.
Yeah, in the words of my friend Amatsukaze Didi from Yikes, Battleship is the kind of class you can play where you shoot and you masturbate and you come back shoot again.
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
But
or when you're playing the Yamato, you just like shoot guns and you wait 80 seconds for your guns to actually turn around to the next target. And meanwhile, you just like take attention to the map.
The other part about having the Battleship do it too is the Battleship's either positioned like it is in this example, where they're kind of like center. And the reason why it's center, or a lot of teams put their Battleship center, is they can shoot this direction and this direction. So exactly as we were saying, the Y, or you can even call it the V, is the crossfire. So the Battleship can crossfire and help out either flank right here and then get broadsides, because ideally these ships down here at this side are going to be angled something like this. I'm just going to move that square out of the way just so I can do this. They're going to be angled something like this, and that Battleship is broadside to them. And exactly kind of as we were saying, you could do that. You can see those opportunities. So you could say, hey, I have a broadside on these two cruisers right here. You guys over here, you need to push because they're gonna just lose a chunk of health. And or hey, these guys aren't broadside, make them angle to me, kind of things. And then some people, another one is shot calling from a cruiser. You could do it. I've done it a lot. You can definitely get away with it, but you still have to micromanage quite a bit. So it is best to do a Battleship.
And just quick mention, we did mention that you could use mods to improve your experience for the very inexperienced people listening to us who haven't used mods at all before. The best resource usually to start would probably just be to use something like Aslane's mod pack. All the mods are approved and pretty much everything you need is included there.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then I don't know if you guys have any other touching points on what ship to call from or anything like that.
I kind of generally just go with whatever, because I'm the main caller, I have to sometimes even step in destroy myself, even though I said not to do it. But really, when we were, like when sometimes your clanmates are not around enough, like it's summer and all that. So you just have to make things work. But generally, like what we want to say is that, you know, ideally battleship, but if you can, at least be on a cruiser, so you can at least have the least amount of things to worry about in a ship that, you know, is relatively safer. Because in destroyers, you have to worry about destroyer engagement, torping, smoking, radaring, and whatever. And that's a lot of things to consider, especially when you have to micromanage 6 other ships too. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's you can do it. It's just not optimal. If you have any choice to be in any other ship than a destroyer, take it. But if you are the most experienced shot caller, you might have to do it. I guess move on to our next point if we're good there. Just team communication, you know, and that kind of coincides with shot calling, is just what's important to say. And one of the things that I am like upset I didn't realize sooner when Evrien and Amatsu helped adopt with our clan battles is just we were calling out dumb things that you didn't really need to call it, like, hey, I have 1 fire, which sure, you know, okay, that doesn't really do anything because, you know, there's a battleship with 1 fire. As long as they're a somewhat smart battleship player, they're just going to let that fire burn and not put it out until they have at least 2 or 3. And it's really not useful information to say 1
hey man,
fire.
that's like 8% of my health gone. That's really important, dog. Okay, you need to understand this is happening.
Is it really 8%?
It's hurting my soul. Okay, it's my soul is not okay. It's not okay.
I'm pyrophobic. It's triggering me.
And then we were calling out things like, you know, oh hey, I got a citadel on this guy, even though it didn't really like chunk away enough of their health. It was just more like bragging than it was anything. Like you would kind of do in a division, like, oh hey, look, I got, you know, all this damage on this guy. But just like 1 citadel takes away, depending on the ship and what ship you're in, like a quarter of its health.
If you're in a winning condition where you have 6 ships alive there too, sure, like you can screw around a little bit, banter back and forth if you will. But usually we're talking about like you want to be keeping your communications channels because you only have 1 voice channel. You want to keep it clean as possible. So when someone has vital information to bring, that guy burn damage control, that guy is low on health, focus him down. Like that doesn't get, you know, just smudged off by, hey, I got a citadel. Oh, hey, I just got 3 fires in a row. Yay.
Yeah, exactly.
Although, of course, if a battleship double citadel is a cruiser, that's probably noteworthy. That's probably going to affect the way that a flank goes.
Yeah, probably say that, you know, oh, he got chunked down to like a quarter health, focus him down first, like
exactly.
That.
My next point, like,
yeah.
You know, whenever we see a Moskva, it's like, okay, you know, battleship, you know, usually Klein, get your guns on him, he'll chunk him, you know, usually for at least half of his health, and then we just send cruisers at him, and there's an easy kill within, what, 30 seconds maybe? And,
fair enough.
You know, you calling out things like, oh, hey, yeah, I got 6 citadels on a ship is worthwhile when now they only have 2,000 health left. You want to get another ship to go and finish that off. So there is a difference between sort of like brag calling and then like actual like informative stuff. Like say you guys are exactly like say you guys are focusing this cruiser right here because he's kind of exposed, but there was another ship over here that got, you know, like 6 citadels on this ship and now he's really weak. You can take the chance to pause on this guy if he still has half or 3/4 health to just get 1 ship down. The guaranteed kill is always the way to go.
Yep. Yeah. So I might just expand on a few things. There are some things that are pretty much always worth calling out. Anytime someone DCPs, if you notice them repair a fire or a flood, always call that out. Torpedo hits are usually worth calling out, particularly if you think you hit a destroyer. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Also, generally, we call out our hydros indirectly by just pinging the map pretty much continuously, every 30 seconds, minute or so. And if you notice any direct change with your RPF, that's important. Mention it as well. Yeah, and then also the shot caller or the flank shot caller should usually be calling out focus fire if they ever notice shots flying wildly.
It's also worthwhile to call out torpedoes, whether they're just coming by or hitting you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
Sometimes
and also
it's good for your teammates to know that there aren't torpedoes coming at them.
Yeah, because like sometimes they'll be fixated on shooting a target, even though their hydro may be on detecting the torpedoes. Like the warning doesn't really show up until they're like 2 kilometers close, and you're like, well, that is not good.
Oh, and then the other thing is 100% you should communicate about when your team is going to use radar. Sorry.
Yes, hydro and radar both, because especially when you have like 2 cruisers pushing 1 flank together, for example, like that they're gonna have to say, oh, my hydro is up, is yours up, or is yours down? So I can put mine up, like that, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And to hold off your radar, like say you're going to, you know, push a DD that's on an auto cap spot, and like for those of you who don't know, an auto cap is kind of what we refer to as a cap that has a destroyer in it, where they can hide behind an island and are relatively safe unless they get flanked. So it's basically an automatic cap as long as you guys don't get flanked or contested. So typically we'll say, the radar will get into position, but usually that island is closer that the radar is going to hide behind. So we need the flanking ships to get in position. So if that radar cruiser goes in and pops their radar right away, the other cruisers are not going to have a shot, and maybe no one will have a shot, and you guys just wasted a radar. So just calling in like the cruisers that are supposed to get the flanking positions, got to call like, hey, I'm ready for radar, or don't use radar yet. I have X amount of minutes or seconds before I get into position. That stuff's really key. And I guess too, the other thing to what was I gonna try to bring it calling out? The one thing we do is we use a lot of RPF on our cruisers, like mostly our flanking cruisers. So you don't really need to communicate that out. We've kind of got it down to a system where you'll just see map pings, and we all kind of know, and you just kind of watch in the corner eye who's pinging. Like say, typically I was Kozero left, he had to go eat, but usually it'll be like me and him on an off flank, and say we're both kind of like set up like the two green cruisers up here, and we're defending this cap, just kind of like waiting to hold. You'll see him ping like right here, and then I'll be pinging over here. So we know we have two different enemies coming at us, and that's important to know. Or we can even triangulate our RPF and say we're both pinging at this square right here. We know the enemy is about right here, especially if we're far enough off, we can sort of triangulate a rough position. And we know like, hey, they're right here, because his is pointing right here, mine's pointing here. They're going to be pushing through here, and that allows us to then reposition to get a better crossfire on them. But just little things, I don't need to always call out, hey, RPF right here. We could just ping, and that way we're not cluttering up the comms while the shot caller could be saying, hey, focus on a target over here, or something like that. That's all really important. When we do really need to communicate what RPF is doing, like say I'm in a Zao, what is that? Was like 9.7 detectability?
Yes.
So you go to, I'm going to draw the circle of the Zao spotting. So say I'm just spotted, and it's 9.7, and my RPF's pointed right here. I know that the destroyer's right here, and I need to tell my teammate, hey, I'm spotted, destroyer's right here. He's within, that, specific range of me. So those are all good uses of callouts.
And by the way, I don't know if we've mentioned yet, it's good to call out if you're spotted and you don't know what's spotting you.
Yes.
Good idea.
Yeah. Also, if it's early game, it's actually not a bad idea to mention how many people are targeting or spotted.
Yeah.
Kind of gives you an estimate of how many ships are on a flank.
Yes.
That's kind of
It's
a
like
general...
you're on the off flank, you see yourself being spotted, priority target jumps up to 4, then obviously there are like 4 ships in the range of able to aim at you. If you take away a battleship, that's at least 3 others. So you're like, well, time to maybe hit the WASD button and get the frick out of it.
Especially on some of the bigger maps like Tears of the Desert, say you're at B or C, and you're kind of defending the off flank, where most ships on the enemy team don't have the draw distance to even target you, because you can also fake that by targeting ships on a smaller map like this. So like this cruiser right here, even though they can't hit a ship down over here, they can just lock onto them if they have nothing else to do and just fake out the RPF. Not that many teams are going to be doing that, but it's definitely a mind game you can play. But say like a bigger map, Tears of the Desert, where they don't have the draw distance, you're on the off flank on B or C, and you see 4 people, 5 people targeting you, you know they're doing a BC rush, and you can communicate with the rest of the team, hey, they need to cap A and reinforce or move and flank them. So things like that can be really important. Let me take a look at what we got next. I don't know if there's anything you guys want to add on to before we move on. I guess one simple thing is, hey, I got flooding on this ship, which means they're going to DCP. Or, hey, I caused a flood.
That would be calling a damage con, more or less.
Yeah, hey, they're flooding, they're going to just die, don't waste your shots is another really important one. Like, they're going to die from that flood or a fire. You guys can focus targets.
Normally, it's not a great idea to rely on a dot finishing someone off, because they could start healing, or they could have their damage con come back up. If someone's like on 1,000 health or 2,000 health and they're gonna die to a dot, better safe than sorry.
Yeah,
Sure.
like you wanna have waste the extra salvo just to make sure he is dead, rather than have like 4 HP ship live off and cap your off cap and proceed to sail to the blue line where you can never find him again for the rest of the game.
Yeah, good point. So I guess we kind of ran long here, but we can start talking about some of the ships if we really want. We can kind of give like the general rundown to kind of save time. I don't know if there's any other things you guys want us to go over and mention it in chat. We're gonna start talking a little bit about the ships. I guess like we can talk about what are the quote unquote meta ships, and the cruiser ones is easily this season at least Hindenburg and Zhao's taken like at least a definitely more favorable position, and the Zhao, now that it has the 12-kilometer torps, it's got better concealment, and you can kind of get those off flanks. It's got really accurate AP, so it's been a lot more popular. And Hindenburg did get a slight nerf to the DPM. It's 1 second longer for its guns to reload, so that's why Zhao's been a little bit more popular. I don't know if you guys agree with that or been seeing the same thing.
Yeah.
People are definitely more eager to try out a Zhao this season.
Yeah, we've been running more of them, and as we were saying, we talked about Yikes using Zhao's. They have great smoke detectability ranging too, and there was a moment where they put 3 Zhao's in a smoke and just focus fired us to death really quick, and we couldn't do anything about it.
We're also been heavily using the new dynamic duo that is having 1 Zhao and 1 Hindenburg, and they work great together on a flank.
Yeah, the downside to the Zhao is it doesn't have a lot of health, so when it's focused, it goes down pretty.
Yeah,
quick.
it's not as tanky.
But
generally, the Zhao stealth combined with the Hindi's tankiness tends to give some really good, how can they say this, Y flank possibilities on an off flank.
Yeah, exactly. And Hindenburg, I think, is still good. I think it's been getting like a little too much flack, where it's people are saying Zhao's number 1. I know at least for our team and how we operate, I don't think that works for us as much. I still think having some Hindis, but we are going to be trying out more Zhao's definitely. It's definitely worth the experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zhao's better and Hindi is worse, but Hindi definitely still has its place.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hindi and Zhao, I think, occupy like 2 different kinds of output style. But I would agree with Willem here in that they all have different niches and roles to fill.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, specifically the Hindenburg's concealment really sucks, so you can't, you're always spotted, whereas Zhao's is pretty good, so you can kind of be the pseudo DD if you need to be, and kind of go off of that. I guess I'll move on to those, and Des Moines seems to be the most popular radar cruiser.
Definitely, yes. No argument about it.
Yeah,
definitely the most popular.
We already, I guess I won't double up on what we've already talked
Des
about.
Moines is better against cruisers, and additionally, since there are kind of fewer Hindenburgs running around these days, or there are still plenty of Hindenburgs running around, so the 50mm plating on Moskva isn't enormously beneficial.
Yeah. Like the thing about the cruiser is that there's an interesting trade-off between the roaming and the stationary radar cruisers. In that Des Moines is countered by Zhao, but not countered so much by Hindenburg, because Hindenburg doesn't have the HE Alpha, and the Des Moines deck armor doesn't really have 50mm to warrant the necessary pen. Whereas the Moskva is not countered by Zhao as much, because Zhao's HE doesn't penetrate the 50mm deck. Whereas Hindenburg does have that penetration, so together with the great DPM, Hindenburg can really punch out a lot of damage into Moskvas. So there's you can see a 2 different sort of cross counter between the 2 sides going on here. It really depends on how the meta shifts before, I guess.
If Hindenburg were nerfed into non-existence,
yeah,
we probably would see more Moskvas.
Yeah,
but I think Des Moines would probably still be favored.
It's kind of like in the nature battles where the predator is gone and the prey is now able to run amok, kind of like that. Yeah. So I guess keep an open mind. What I want to drive away is to keep an open mind about these ships. Don't say for sure how the meta will develop, because Wargaming is constantly dishing out these ship changes. Zhao's torpedo buff, Zhao's torpedo buff, Hindenburg's reload nerf, Moskva's
Grozovoi
change.
Went from being the absolute worst to being
God tier almost. Yeah, well, we're still waiting on that. To be fair, we haven't reached a consensus in the community yet about where Grozovoi exactly positions, or whether nerf like with Khabarovsk is in due. So not sure yet.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess Des Moines is really popular because it has better concealment and the longest duration radar compared to the Moscow. At least now the Worcester is the same, and I believe Minotaur's is 56 seconds. With the now it's actually less.
48.
They buffed or
Yeah.
they nerfed the radar mod. Upgrade.
Yeah, and I think before it's kind of restricted to those who do have the radar mod, but now the arsenal is open and you can buy radar mods with a coal.
Yeah,
coal,
so
right?
radar mod
exactly.
is less useful, but it's also less scarce. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, most people will have the 15k coal to spend on it, so I don't think it's going to be something too out of the range, far stretch to say that you don't expect every single radar ship to run that radar mod.
Yeah, and
I would say that most people who were able to grind some oil before the change definitely have enough coal converted from that oil end to be able to get themselves a radar mod, which is really nice.
Most of those people already had a radar mod or two just from ship
Yeah,
containers or
even,
missions.
like if you are just like a guy playing clan, playing together in a clan, even if you didn't participate in clan battles, even then you probably have enough to hopefully get yourself a radar mod and maybe be able to get yourself into clan battles.
Yeah, exactly.
Radar mod is basically like necessary.
So yeah, these three ships are like the main ships you'll see and are probably the most meta and generally like the most accepted as the best ships for clan battles would be Hindenburg, Zhao, and Des Moines. If you have those, probably
may as well toss in Gearing.
Yeah, I'm talking about just cruisers. Those are like the ones you should take if you have them. If you don't have them, start grinding for them. It's how you are probably going to be the most likely to find a space on a clan battles team. I know we struggle with that where we have like so many Des Moines players, but you can't really have a whole team of Des Moines and expect to do very well. So
I mean, if the meta devolves down to only Zhaos, then maybe.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
we'll never see that they come because we know that people are always looking out at how the meta develops, and if there is such a trend, chances that we'll find some counterplay to Des Moines before we even get there.
Yeah, exactly. And like we were saying earlier too, this is kind of like the general meta position. There are teams that made some of the non-meta ships we'll talk about that are not as great, or we might even say you shouldn't bring these in. There are teams that find a way, but as for like the average team and the average player, probably should shy away from it. I mean, feel free to try it out. You're never gonna learn it works or doesn't work until you find a way to either fail at it or succeed with it. So don't be afraid to try things.
Now we have a Bravo league, so you can don't worry about the punishment of losing rating if you want to try something really retarded like 7 Haverovsks.
Exactly. So I mean,
it's a viable build if it's allowed.
So I'd say then the best destroyers, or at least like the most accepted destroyers, are Gearing and Yu Yang. And we already kind of talked about it, so I don't want to beat a dead horse. But Gearing has long range torps, 16.5 kilometers. It's kind of like a jack of all trades destroyer, can do every job pretty well. Whereas Yu Yang it's a little bit lower in the water and has I guess it leads a good amount of AP pens, right? Whereas Gearing is thicker.
Evrien doesn't get as much AP pens as Gearing because Evrien doesn't have the 21mm, and also Evrien is like thinner.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yu Yang is a bit more vulnerable in a gun duel.
Yeah.
Destroyer v destroyer.
So yeah, you take a Yu Yang basically for the radar.
Since you can't threaten anyone with your torpedoes either.
That's right.
Exactly.
Kind of have to rely on your team to back you up against Gearing, because if like equal health Gearing versus Yue Yang 1v1, Gearing should always come on top. That's what I believe.
Yeah, exactly. So Yu Yang does have the deep water torps that creep up on people, but as we kind of said, most teams are coordinating their hydro, or torps are almost luck. Yeah, most good teams.
You do have to have that coordination there.
Exactly. And then, so I guess the most meta battleships are, at least on NA, EU tends to disagree, but is Montana and Yamato. And Yamato is basically a little bit more static in its play, but it does have 18.1 inch guns, so they can pen almost anything, whether they're bow on or broadside. But you do also get some overpens with there too as well on certain ships. Monty is, I don't know, I'd probably say easily the most popular battleship. It's the most flexible. It can kind of do every job pretty good, kind of like we were saying about the Gearing. It's also got 12 guns, so it can turn away and sort of kite if needed. It can push in because it's still got 6 guns in the front. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add with those before we move on to the less accepted ships.
Montana is better at punishing mistakes, but Yamato can punish people who aren't making mistakes.
Yes,
Exactly.
that's true.
That's a great way to put it. So yeah, these the next ships we're gonna talk about here are the playable, but a good team can really easily exploit them kind of territory. Where again you can kind of get away with certain things at lower tiers. Lower ranks of clan battles. So if this is what you got, you can still make do with them. We're not trying to trash them or anything. It's just we kind of going off of our experience of, hey, whenever we see like a ship like the Moskva we're going to talk about, we kind of just know that with Hindenburgs to start firing their HE at them, we'll whittle them away. And if we have a Yamato, they can bow pen a Moskva. So they're not going to last very long, and they're pretty static. So
well, they can bow pen a Moskva as well as any battleship.
True.
The strip is 50.
The strip, for those who do not understand the buff of the Moskva strip, basically Moskva's bell used to be 25mm from top to bottom, like vertically. But now there's a strip of
the lower bit is 50mm.
Lower bit, yes, is now being buffed to 50mm. Now, why is
so you're not going to get any bow citadels against the Moskva?
Exactly. Yeah. So you can still technically, if the shell plunges through the top part and goes into citadel there, but it's a lot rarer now because what happens before is a battleship like Montana or Yamato who just aim the guns right at the Moskva's bell and just fire, and there's the 3 free bell citadels because Moskva bell is 25mm.
This is why I'm glad you guys are here to explain stuff like that.
10K. Ooh, citadel.
Yeah, and if you look at the Moskva's module, you actually find out that the citadel belt is actually just at the height to cover the height of the citadel. So if the shell doesn't plunge through from like top to from above to the citadel, then you won't get bounce citadel. You just get bounces, which is in my opinion pretty damn overpowered for a ship for a cruiser. But we'll see. Like this buff, of course, is yet to be examined because, like we said, Moskva is countered by Hindenburgs, and Moskva didn't thrive in Season 2 because Hindenburg was a meta. And if we see that Hindenburg nerf does bring in enough Zals who doesn't counter Moskva as much, then Moskva may see a resurgence. But then again, he does also have a couple weaknesses.
That Moskva is countered by Hindenburg. I'd be more along the lines of it doesn't have any particular strengths against the Hindenburg.
Right. Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Because the fact of the matter is, it still has 65,000 health. That's
huge HP pool is a lot of things to add. 65.4k, I think.
Yeah, 65.4. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, that's plenty.
Yeah. But I mean, if you want, you can
it's still going to take plenty of time to burn it down with the Hindenburg or Zao.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And the other thing about Moskva is if you ever catch one broadside, it just eats citadels and it'll go down pretty quick. And it doesn't have the concealment
particularly fast. And it has also a huge profile, so it gets very much punished for positioning, or if it gets outflanked, it's really, really bad.
Yeah, luckily the Moskva is pretty fast for its size and clumsiness.
It surprisingly is in a straight.
Yeah, it's got Iowa's engine apparently, if I recall. But basically, the point is that Moskva has this as a backup to complement its weaknesses, which is if you see a flank is about to lose, you have to plan ahead and just use your extra awesome speed to get away or enter a kiting position before the enemy can fire at your broadside, which is your most vulnerable part.
So yeah, and then.
On a quick tangent, I wonder if they buffed the Moskva in such a manner because the Stalingrad 32mm bow might be coming.
Of course they did.
Yeah. I think
justification.
Just today, the news about Stalingrad was coming. I think like the version where there is HE is now going to be the finalized because we're going to have the Stalingrad coming up.
Because that AP was good lord.
Although noteworthy, they didn't say anything about the bow armor being 32 or 25 on this.
Yeah, that's what I noticed too.
On the Stalingrad, so I think its bow is still going to be 25.
I mean, I believe the Stalingrad should at least have 27. Honestly, due to
Moskva has 25.
Honestly, I would prefer 27mm bow on the Stalingrad, which would basically make pretty much that such as that.
In tier 10, it doesn't make much of a difference.
As Des Moines, kinda.
Tier 10, most battleships can overmatch like 30mm.
Plus, it's still gonna have the 50mm strip.
Yes.
So yeah, then we'll move on to to Henry, unless you guys have anything else about Moskva. Let's talk about her radar, longest range radar, but shorter duration. So
Well, I find like this kind of radar is situational, even in randoms, where like you have to really communicate because of the short duration. Like I'm going to use radar on this guy who is over here in this cap. Who has shot here, and like then after the communication is done, then we make use of the awesome range, a shorter duration. Because let's say if you just pop it and your team hasn't their guns turned even, like the gun traverse probably is enough time to take away one salvo, or even like not be able to do anything because he's so far off from everyone's shooting direction. So like that is most important, and yeah, also the radar mod is absolutely needed for clan battles for Moskva.
Yeah. Next ship to talk about is Henry.
Don't run it.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't run it.
We kind of laugh at it whenever we see one.
Teahee.
It's like
we don't mean to trash on it. Like I'm pretty sure there's ways to make Henry work, but right now in the meta,
there's going to be something better.
Yeah, it's going to be something better.
I think it's like perfectly summed up by just take Zhao instead. It does the job just better.
Zhao or Hindenburg, just take one of those, and
like the thing about Henry is that Henry even in randoms is what they call a low impact cruiser by default. You just rack up damage, but your damage kind of just accumulates to nothing. Even if you survive to the end, you may see your team die without you being able to contribute much because you're always on the run on the very far max range distance.
And they're kind of a selfish.
And in clan battles, you want to really play too, so you can deliver impact. That's why ships like radar cruisers, radar destroyers are so powerful because those radars are just godly. And and Zhao have the awesome HE Alpha, Hindenburg's DPM. They're all important team play tools. But Henry kind of just self-preservation, sure, but like what's next?
Yeah, I mean the one thing it does have is it's really quick. It can reposition very fast if it needs to. It's got the biggest guns of a cruiser in the game, or at least right now. I think does Stalingrad beat it?
Yes, Stalingrad beat it.
Yeah. So
Stalingrad 305, Henry is 240.
Yeah, so keep that in mind at least right now.
When like more than one Minotaur per team becomes meta, then we can talk about Henry.
Then we can talk about it. Or
until then,
because Henry's caliber overmatches Minotaur Bell. So for those who don't know.
So yeah, that's just kind of it. To take a Zhao instead, if you got it, it can do fine in certain cases. It's just there's better ships to fill its role. I guess now we've kind of already talked about the Worcester over the Des Moines. Again, I'd say most teams should probably avoid it unless they have like a really good strategy and a really good player.
Unless they tailor the strategy around it and also have a very good player, it's probably safer just to stick with the casual Des Moines.
Yeah, and I think the same kind of thing can be said about Minotaur. I don't know. I know, Evrien, we're probably gonna launch you into a rant about this, but
well, I'm not gonna like I said, I'm very open to opinions about ships, and William here already agrees with me that Minotaur is very niche, and they don't even run it in 07 apparently. Well, never did. I meant, but Minotaur, like I said, like you said, it's very depending on the player who is has tons of experience in the ship. I'm fine with running Minotaur because I myself have over 1,000 of games in Minotaur in random, so I know what to do in a Minotaur to keep myself alive. But if you have someone who just grinded through Neptune the day before and just got Minotaur now, probably not a good idea to play her, honestly. Like, the thing about clan battles is you want to be sure to, first of all, stay alive, and second of all, to make a difference with the game impact. If you cannot even guarantee the first thing and you die to your enemy in the first 3 minutes, then yeah, it may not be a good idea to run that ship.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of the same thing exactly about Worcester is it's still a pretty new ship, so there's, unless you have a lot of time to sink into it. Like, we tried it last night. I had just gotten it, played 2 games, so it's a really bad example, but it's early in the season. We can kind of afford to test things out. And if we would have waited till later in the season, we would have, had already developed strategies and habits around different ships, so we decided to give it a go. And I can't really say, like, it did okay, but it didn't really, like, have a huge impact either. I think Des Moines would mostly do the same job, just better. So there are slight advantages that we could spend some time and work around and tailor our strategies and positions around it to make it work. But do you want to do that, and does that complement the rest of your team and the rest of your team's play style? You have to think about. So
it's that question of like, does the weapon dictate doctrine, or does doctrine dictate weapon?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, I guess the next one is
one second, just before we finish off here, I think it's worth noting that radar cruiser actually has a common weakness in that when the enemies are pushing into them in a way that they can utilize their radar and island cover effectively, they are more times a liability than an asset for the team. Because unlike Zaos and Hindenburgs, who can just roam freely in open water and rely on their very good armor to protect against enemy incoming AP shells, Des Moines doesn't have the same thing. Like, regardless what you hear from Euro, no, that man was not being fully serious when he made a video. Des Moines was not meant to be an open water cruiser.
He even went out and said he was joking. Don't do this.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's just a joke.
I had my share of spotter fucking Moines.
Yeah, so I guess my point of raising that is that if you want to play more radar cruisers into your team, consider how to keep them alive more often, because that is the biggest issue with the radar cruisers. They are so vulnerable outside of island covers, and once their position is being undermined, they have no way to get out of there alive, and chances that the Moine will die very quickly before you can even know what's going on.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
I'd
most
rather not
actually.
run any more radar cruisers than you need to.
Exactly.
And the ones that you need, but you'd rather run something else.
All right. How
Next
we finish
is Republic. I know you guys had said you guys had run that before, and
we
does
had
have
a lot of fun with Republic back in season 2 when people weren't really used to how fast and how fast the reload is. We
were on the receiving end for that one.
It's surprisingly easy to catch Hindenburgs and Zaos with some Republic shells if people aren't paying proper attention. That said, it's very squishy. It's got 32 all around.
I got spammed to
death. Get farmed down by cruisers pretty quick if you get in a bad position.
Also,
so it does the damages, but it also takes it.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. Worcester with IFHE can pen 32mm, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there you go. So even more reasons that Republic is squishy for her liking. Like, you are the counter to cruisers, but you're also countered by cruiser HE spam.
Yeah, exactly. But it does, have some benefits of being very fast and able to reposition and kind of like move on the fly. So it does have that going for it.
Very effectively because of the shell's penetration. I have no idea, but I think the shells actually is the best AP penetration in all top tier battleships.
It has more penetration in the AP shells than Yamato until about, I think, 17 kilometers.
Yeah, which is basically your effective firing range in clan battles.
One thing we should say before too about the Minotaur is you're always pretty much going to be running a radar Minotaur.
Yeah.
Very, very, very rarely do you see a smoke.
I did accidentally bring smoke into
I saw an enemy team that was running a smoke Minotaur the other day. Can I just take a moment to talk about this?
Sure.
I was just sitting in a Yamato the other day, and the enemy team had a smoke Minotaur on Tears of the Desert. He smoked up like north of A, and I didn't see him the entire game, but I popped the spotter plane and triple sit him, and he died.
Did he co-hacks?
F.
No. He just sat there and started firing out of smoke.
Good player.
Don't play Smoke Minotaur.
Yeah, smoke is viable in randoms, but not so much in competitive. Although it can be interesting if you want to say, like in King of the Seas for anti-air. I guess
don't play Smoke Minotaur in Kings of the Seas either.
Yeah.
There has been that one clan in the European server who did that in the King of the Seas 5.
There are a lot of clans on the European server.
Yeah, I guess you're right. My apologies. But William and I would agree both on that radar Minotaur in clan battles. If you intend on bringing one, is a lot more effective and useful than a smoke Minotaur.
Generally, basically, if your ship can run radar, you probably should.
Yep.
Yes, that's right.
Be that a Yank, be that a Minotaur, be whatever.
So yeah, I guess we're done on Minotaur and Republic. Unless there's anything you guys want to add.
Midway Hakulyu? No.
I guess we can kind of scroll over the rest of them kind of quick, just to kind of get through this fast. We've been going for a while. Z52. I mean, it's not the greatest concealment. It can get outspotted. Eats AP pens, short range torps.
Yeah. It's got niche positions on certain maps, but the problem is at least one of those maps was removed from the rotation in Islands of Ice, and another one of those maps was changed in Mountain Range. I'm not sure I don't know whether it works or not on Mountain Range anymore, but it was changed.
Very much so. And also that good players will know how to play around the hydro of the Z52. They will just basically find a way to keep away from that general position, like you would do to a radar, and will bring like ships to fight the Z52 to outrate him on the HP before he smokes up the hydros.
And then
and it also doesn't have strong guns.
Yeah, that's right. HE is pitiful.
So you can't just
AP
make up for that like Grozovoi.
Yeah.
I guess we can touch on Grozovoi then next.
Z52 right now is probably the best, the least favorite destroyer for like randoms. Like even Shimakaze is probably better than Z.
Yeah, I guess
I wouldn't go that far.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, like depends on how you play.
Z
it, of course.
has its niche spots, but Shima is just kind of a meme.
Cuter did run Shima one Shima last season. Went to pretty good placements for a while. All right. Sorry. Back to Grozovoi. You said.
Yeah, I guess William already talked about Grozovoi a little bit, how it could be like a sleeper and maybe become more popular. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add that hasn't already been said to it.
No, not really.
Not really.
If someone wants to hear the in-depth thing, they can just watch the VOD and go back towards the beginning.
Yeah, like the thing about Grozovoi is that it still needs tons of Battleship AP pens, but there's only one Battleship in clan battles, and chances that you'll be very far from him to actually get fired on effectively. But I have seen people who run Grozovoi in clan battles and get devastated by Battleship, like Amatsukaze, like the guy we've been talking about. He was running Grozovoi with Yikes, and he got a 13k salvo landed onto him and devastated him by only the Battleship, by only Montana's front guns. So, and he was battle in, so the small profile still landed him that much damage.
It's a big boat, you gotta be careful.
That is right, it's a big boat. It's been bigger boat than Gearing, and Gearing already, we know for a fact, eats a shit ton of AP pens from
I
Battleship.
can confirm when I played my Yamato.
Yeah, so
But at the same time, Grozovoi is actually quite fast, so it can be, you can kind of weird people out. People are used to shooting at Gearing's. Grozovoi is a bit faster, so maybe they'll miss you low.
Alright, awesome. That details, I think.
So Shimakaze, you talked about a little bit. Cuter ran one.
Cuter did last season, and they had pretty good results, but I think they played to they cater Shima to their playstyle, unlike what we would do, which is to shift the playstyle to Shima. I'm not Cuter, so I don't really know how I would comment on it, but I think my comment is that if they can do it, I think Shimakaze has a place in the competitive meta.
Yeah, I'd say it's just not quite flexible enough. Like,
that's right.
It can drop torpedoes and it can cap.
That's
they cannot,
one of those things it can only do every 2 minutes.
As we kind of had said, torpedoes in clan battles, especially against clans that know what they're doing,
you can't count on them.
It's pretty much luck. Like it's a gamble. We talked about we just run like denial torps and things, and even then that doesn't really work all the time. Like they just turn in around them because they kind of expect it. So I guess we can move on to Kaba or Habarask.
Why would you run a Kabarask when you could run a Hanri? Why would you run a Hanri when you could run a Hindenburg or a Zhao?
Okay, let me just put it this way. It's the most fun ship to play, well maybe Worcester as well, in the Bravo tier. How about that? Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, like it doesn't really have a whole lot to offer. It's always spotted. I don't know, it has good guns and stuff, but then again, when you're...
Why run it when you could run a cruiser?
Yeah, when you're facing against a coordinated team...
Habarask kind of relies on the enemy team to misplay in randoms, to not know what the fuck to do with a speedy little HE spammer. But in competitive, like in clan battles, everyone knows what to do with Habarask.
Honestly, you can just kind of ignore a Kabarask.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, also that, because he gets outspotted, and if he tries to do anything funny, like cap, well, good luck trying.
Exactly, and a coordinated team like in randoms, you can hit the F3 key on a Kaba, all you want, but your team's not guaranteed to take shots. But when you're in a clan battle team, if your team has shots and they got nothing else to shoot at, they're going to take that shot, and they're probably not going to miss as much. So
we're talking about good players in clan battles, not just your average randoms who snipe from 24 kilometers in a CONQR and does 30k per game.
And then I guess next is the GK. I talked about earlier how EU kind of uses as pushing ship. You can get away with it.
I'm actually interested in seeing what if there's EU replays. I'd love to watch them.
They say they only use it with a 0 DD setup.
Yeah, but from what I can see, GK doesn't have a place on NA because I'm assuming your stream is catered to NA viewers. So
Mostly,
I would I would personally advise against taking GK if you have another option.
Exactly. Just bring a Montana.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It just
like,
doesn't have all that much going for it. Like, yeah, it doesn't die, but it doesn't do much else either.
Yeah, and the Hydro only comes into effect when like push into a cap where Destroyer is already in it, because like if you can see Hydro from like torps from 4 kilometers away, like chances that your big size can't really do much to torpedo beat them. You're still gonna need like 1 or 2, even if you turn in.
Exactly. Then the next is the CONQR. I mean, the CONQR is basically an anti-battleship with his HE.
There's only one battleship.
There's only one battleship.
Exactly.
That's the answer you need.
So you don't.
And if you want to use a CONQR, then
and it
you'd be better
has
off
the
using
lowest
anything
HP
else.
pool of a battleship. So if it ever gets into a position where it's focused, it's going to go down quick, whether you have super heal or not.
Yeah,
So
the super heal is very misleading because many teams will be like, oh, I'll just heal back up all my lost health. But no, the thing is like CONQR, if you cannot get out undetected, which likely is that the destroyer will be rushing at you to keep you spotted in 11.8 kilometers, you'll be constantly focus fired by all the cruiser HE spamming in the entire map. And yeah, you're not going to be enjoying that.
And you've got 32 millimeters of plating.
Yeah, so that means every single cruiser, including IFHE Worcester, will be able to hit you for full pen damage.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
just bring a Montana or Yamato. Well, it's not their best choice. It's not accurate enough to use. Its AP is not bad, but it's just not accurate enough to reliably hit, especially at a little bit more of a range that climb.
I would go as far as to say that the AP is bad, but maybe it's just me.
The AP is short fuse, it's good for the cruisers, but for battleships, not so much.
Exactly. If you get pushed into a battleship fight, you're gonna lose.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that kind of sums up the ships. I don't know if anybody has any last minute questions they've seen going, or we call it a night. I think that's kind of about it. We've answered a lot of the questions we've seen. So yeah, I think that's about it. Do you guys want to add anything else before we go?
Nope.
Enjoy the game, please.
Yeah, have fun playing. Like, you know, we talked about doing things seriously. Like, have a fun and like seriousness balance.
You've got Bravo team. Have fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even on Alpha team, like, you know, be serious about it. But I mean, have your moments where you guys have some fun, and like you were saying, when you know you have a lead, joke around, but keep it within limits, because that's how you lose.
Yeah, come on, don't be like me and team kill one of your Des Moines because he's being an ass in chat.
You know, always go do
do
that. Go do that. One of the things is team kill penalty in the clan battles.
So yeah, I guess.
So if you have something to take out on your friendly clanmate, best time to do it if you're winning at this, and you are gonna win by points regardless.
10 out of 10, we'll do it again.
Yep.
So, yeah, thanks for joining me, guys, and helping people, and you know, sharing this. We got plenty of people watching and asking questions, so that's awesome. And we're gonna keep doing more of these, and hopefully, you know, that we got some new mentors in here. They've been really valuable, so thank you guys. It would have just been me and like Lobster just talking about our view of clan battles from our clan, and that's a pretty narrow view if you consider all things. So thanks for being here and showing your input and making this a better stream.
Sure.
Yep.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you for being here, guys. See ya.
Yeah, see you guys, and join our next stream. We're going to be doing more, so give us suggestions or anything. If you guys have questions that are on, feel free to ask them in Discord, and we'll be happy to answer. See you guys.